Hello, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's Top 25 Star Trek Episodes live discussion. We are definitive Star Trek experts here to definitively decide once and for all what are the top 25 best Star Trek episodes. Now, what makes us the best Star Trek experts, you might ask? Well, because we have webcams and microphones, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, before I get into the rules of how it works here, let me first introduce the other Star Trek experts, starting with the man who first introduced me to Star Trek in the first place, and a friend of the channel who's on all the time. Might have something to do with the fact that he's my brother. It's Akton.
Hello, and thanks, Mark. That's probably the best introduction you've ever given me. That's pretty cool. Yeah, really looking forward to talking about the top 25 Star Trek episodes. I guess Mark is going to explain how these episodes were determined pretty soon. I really enjoyed rewatching. I rewatched most of these episodes in preparation for this, and I really enjoyed watching them. Unlike when we did our top 25 time travel movie countdown a couple months ago, there was not any episode here which I found like it was torture to sit through it. That was terrible. Unlike that other countdown where Terminator Genesis, not mentioning any names of any horrible movies I had to suffer through. But in this case, I enjoyed every one of these. Now you'll see that there are some that I don't think belong in a conversation about the best Star Trek episodes. However, it doesn't mean that I didn't enjoy them. So I'm really looking forward to this.
Cool. And the other Star Trek expert is a guy I've talked Star Trek with several times before, even when we were supposed to be talking about Game of Thrones. The guy is such a Star Trek fan. He has a big Deep Space Nine poster in the background of many of his videos that have nothing to do with Star Trek. It's Phil the Issues guy.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be back here with you guys talking some more stuff and specifically talking some Star Trek. I feel kind of bad calling myself a Star Trek expert because I only really like 4 of the... One of those series I kind of whistle... Are we talking about the animated series tonight? Is that included in the top 5 Star Trek series list? Because I don't know. I do have to say, watching back though, just as an overall point, and I'm just going to say this just in general, I got a better appreciation for one of the series that I didn't like quite as much my first time through on this rewatch because it made me feel like I was watching the same universe. Another series, maybe my list, I also went back like Akton and watched most of these episodes minus 2 that I didn't want to cry. There was one Next Generation episode and one Deep Space Nine episode I did not watch because I was not in a crying mood this week. There's no crying on Star... No, there's lots of crying on Star Trek. But for the most part, I'm also very excited to be here. I'm more of a, which might be in like the opposite of what Gene Roddenberry's dream was. I am a Deep Space Nine first. Everything else kind of trickles down after that, in the original series as well. So this is going to be interesting. My list might be altered, and I might be a very negative force for one series that we're going to be talking about here. So I apologize ahead of time. So I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me, Mark.
Cool, yeah, and let's not ruin the illusion here. We're all Star Trek experts, so let's just go with that.
Anyway. I'm sorry.
Sure we are.
Anyway,
Sure.
And just a quick hello to those in the chat who joined us live. I see Cardinal Doomsday, of course, and Echo Boyer. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong. I always do. Anyway, thanks for joining, and anyone else who happens in. So let me explain the rules. So those who've seen other videos, I've done a similar format to this, which I actually sort of pinched from post-show recaps. But anyway, it's
Love to Rob
but it's always
you're giving him credit for it, so then that's fine.
Hey, he comes up with my whole channel's based around his Survivor recaps, know-it-alls.
Yeah.
I based my whole thing on doing a know-it-all about Breaking Bad. So so lots of love to Rob.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Cool. So how this works, I went to IMDB and checked out what the top 5 rated episodes of each of the 5 Star Trek series. So instead of, like I always said this before, a lot of these top lists, Star Trek lists, favor, like, will have almost all Next Generation and original series episodes, and I didn't want to do that. I wanted each of the 5, even, that last one, to have equal play, although not counting the animated series, but just not going there. But anyway, So original series, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and Enterprise. Looked up what are the top 5 highest rated episodes on IMDb, and they do their rankings through their viewers. So it's not like some fat critic sitting around being pretentious. It's actually, average rating from a whole bunch of viewers. So let me. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, that being said, and Akton hinted at this earlier, and I think I just want to preface at the beginning here just by saying, in some of the series, there's some episodes that belong nowhere on this list that people voted for because they like little furry things and they don't know any other episodes from the series. So there's like certain
you're talking about.
I don't know what I'm talking about. Oh, there's certain episodes that just stick out like a sore thumb on this list. I think for the most part they got some really great episodes, but I think there's also a few glaring omissions in some of the series.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. But again, I wanted to be impartial and not sort of.
Totally.
Yeah.
So I'll name the episodes we'll be ranking down. So starting with the original series, I'll go one best from worst in each one, or top rated to lowest rated, I should say. For each one, the original series is City on the Edge of Forever, Mirror Mirror, Balance of Terror, The Trouble with Tribbles, Space Speed. The Next Generation is The Inner Light, The Best of Both Worlds, Yesterday's Enterprise, The Measure of a Man, and Q Who. Deep Space Nine is In the Pale Moonlight, Trials and Tribulations, The Visitor, Duet, Call to Arms. And Voyager is Blink of an Eye, Scorpion, Living Witness, Message in the Bottle, and The Year of Hell. And Enterprise is Twilight, Azadi Prime, In the Mirror Darkly, the 2-parter Countdown 0 Hour, and the 3-parter The Forge Awakening and Kirshar. Cool. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna make up our collective list. So we each have our own personal list. So we'll each take turns naming the bottom episode on our list, and that will become its official ranking. And so we'll come up with a collective list. And so only the top episodes will end up being only the ones that we all agree upon. Cool. So any statements before we start? Any questions?
No, I mean, I think you pretty much covered it all, and then the preface that there are some episodes that are glaring mistakes, or glaring mistakes of this list of people voting for it just because it's a popular episode. But I think for the most part, they got a good chunk of episodes. Even the series I'm not so into that we're going to talk about on this list, it's good episodes from that series. It's my own personal biases that are mixed in more than quality of the storytelling.
Absolutely. Cool. All right. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. Let's get started.
All right, yeah, cool. So I'll just come up with the screensaver while randomly decide who goes first, or the screen share. Go to the random number generator. Should be coming up. Okay, so I'll do it at the bottom of my screen. Yeah, bottom of my screen. So Atkins 1, Phil is 2, I'm 3. And so we'll just hit this.
Excellent.
And it's 3, so I go first. Alrighty, I'll just stop that.
The live chat, the Walking Dead fanboy says, "My head hurts. I don't understand a thing about what you people are talking about." Timo says, "I have no clue about Star Trek, but good to see you guys. Good to see everyone in the live chat that's joining us, even the non-Star Trek fans. We'll try to make it as out there as possible, so you don't understand a single word."
But I really love how people are joining us just because we're on the air talking about something, even if you don't have the slightest idea about Star Trek. That's awesome.
Yeah, I see Timo in the chat, and I know she knows nothing about Star Trek.
Yeah.
So
I can't imagine. I can't imagine that you're going to last the whole 2 hours or however long it takes. But if you do, good for you.
Okay, so I'll start. I'm starting. Well, name the official 25, and I think here I'm probably going to get disagreements and a lot of comments like, "How could you put that at the bottom?" But for me, this was the most glaring. Doesn't deserve to be here, and I know a lot of people, including you, Akton, like this episode a lot more than I do. But I'm going to have to go with Q Who.
Ooh.
Episode. For me,
I am not surprised. I am not surprised at all. I kind of expected this, but go on.
Yeah, for me, this episode it's not bad. Like, I agree with what you said earlier. There are no bad episodes on this list. They're all like average to good. But to me, this episode was kind of just it's okay, because it seems to me they took a lot of time introducing, like, ooh, look at the Borg, it's so cool, they're so awesome, and that the story doesn't really, with Q like being, oh, I'm going to test you, it doesn't really hold up to me. So to me, it's just sort of, I get the eeriness of it, and I think the eeriness really works, but overall, it's not one of my favorite episodes.
But Mark, we have Borg babies.
Yeah. And I, of course, disagree. This is a long-standing disagreement. And I also know what other disagreements are coming between Mark and I, because we've been talking about these for years. I know that I am going to ruin one of his top episodes, maybe his number one, and he's going to ruin one of my top episodes. It's just, I know how it works. But
what have I wanted it to? Sibling rivalry.
Yeah. But there's a lot of agreement, too. But this is number 15 on my list. So it's not like I have it in the top 10 or anything, but...
wow, very interesting. This is number 14 on my list. There was number 14 on my list.
So I just think back to what it felt to watch this for the first time and be introduced to the Borg. And I was just so blown away by it. And I still get that feeling anytime I watch it, even though I've seen a billion trillion Borg things by now. And also, this is really a great Q episode, because it's the first episode where he's really kind of... in his own twisted way, helping the Enterprise. Like he's teaching them a lesson, and which he would do more prominently in the finale, All Good Things. But this is the first time where he really does it. So I just thought it was a great Q episode, introduction to the Borg. So definitely higher than 25 on my list, but
and I would also add about Q that it's the first time on the show that Q isn't annoying, saying things like games. Like, it's the first episode he isn't like that. It's the first episode he seems a little bit more rounded and a little bit more nefarious in some of his plans. Whereas in every time before that, it was just kind of a joke that he was like dancing around and eating scenery. And I feel like this is the first. I don't think it's the best Q thing. There's a glaring missing omission from the list of a great Q episode, of one of my favorite Q episodes on this list, Tapestry. But this is the first decent Q episode in the series. I think the previous two are laughable in some ways.
I will say, Phil, that Tapestry, I believe, was number 6 on IMDb, and I was tempted to sort of do a switch, but again, I'm impartial, and so I had to put this in here. But yeah, I will say, yeah, he really helped the Enterprise crew by allowing 18 people to die. But anyway, let's go ahead and move on to number 24.
Well, in his own in his own twisted Q way, he taught them a big lesson. He doesn't care about mere human lives. I did say his own twisted Q way.
Putting a little jab in there, I know. So, Akton, you get to decide what number 24 will be.
Okay, number 24, which is number 25 on my personal list. And I do not believe this belongs anywhere remotely near this conversation. And that is the Deep Space Nine episode, Trials and Tribulations. Now, don't get me wrong. I enjoyed this episode. It was fun. I had a good time with it. But it's a tribute episode. I believe it was aired. It was maybe the 30th anniversary or something like that. And Voyager did something special too. And that was followed up by a big anniversary special. And it's a tribute episode. So to me, putting this in a discussion about the top 25 greatest Star Trek episodes would be like putting a Led Zeppelin cover band into a discussion about your favorite all-time bands. It doesn't work. It's a tribute. It almost should be its own like separate category. That's not to say that I don't enjoy it. I just don't believe it stands on its own as a truly great Star Trek episode. It's just merely a tribute of a mediocre episode to begin with. So I don't know. I just do not feel like this belongs anywhere. If we were doing the top 200, I would not feel like this belongs. I just think, not that it's that bad, but it should just be its own separate category. Like, it doesn't belong in a discussion about the greatest Star Trek episodes because it does not stand on its own.
See, this is going to seem like a weird... this could seem like a weird response to that, but I think it deserves in a conversation of top Star Trek episodes in a sense, but not Deep Space Nine episodes. It's not indicative of what Deep Space Nine is all about. So it seems like this is where I'll agree with you. I think the episode from a just a tactical standpoint of the way they integrated the old episode into the new is a marvel of the technology at the time. I think it's 10 billion times better than that Voyager Star Trek 6 thing that was whatever the fuck they were trying with two Voc and the ears out there, whatever the shit that was. But I agree with you that on a list of where we're talking about the top 5 Deep Space Nine episodes: An Improbable Cost, Die As Cast, Purgatory's Shadow, Inferno's Light, Way of the Warrior, like all these other episodes that could have been in the list. It's clogging up the stars. Exactly, all of season 6. Besides, I mean, like basically, it's clogging up a giant spot on this list that it doesn't need to be. So I'm gonna bet, as much as I love Deep Space Nine and think everything Deep Space Nine should be up in the top part of the list, I agree with your placement of this episode. I wanted to put it this low, but I didn't have the balls to.
Well, yeah, I'll say it was ranked at number 24 on my list. So this is exactly where I would have put it. And it actually kind of offends me when people say this is the best Deep Space Nine episode. This was actually tied on IMDb for number 1 within the Pale Moonlight as the best Deep Space Nine. And it totally is not. Like, it's a fun episode. It's a great tribute. I totally agree. It's like a tribute band, and it's fun, but it has the plot is paper thin. It falls apart. I mean, it's kind of funny, but it's mainly just, oh, look at that. That's cool. Nowhere near does it belong Deep Space Nine. But anyway.
No, and last point on this is just, it's unfortunate because a series like Deep Space Nine is tough to pick single episodes for people to vote on and watch. And probably it's the episode that people that haven't watched a lot of Deep Space Nine, it's the one episode that they've watched. And the people that are fans of TOS go, oh, this is pretty cool. Look, Kirk and Spock are on the screen again. So they vote for it and stuff too. So I think it sways the numbers a lot with that stuff too. And yeah, so that's it.
Yeah, totally. Okay, Phil, so you can go ahead and name number 23 on our list.
Okay, which is number 25 on my list. And I know this is going to seem harsh to some because it is probably a good episode. There's no real problems with it, but it's the one that bored me. And where I'm going to talk about my situation, it's a little mean, it's a little harsh because I know there are fans of this series. I think Star Trek universally there's not a lot of universal truths amongst Star Trek fans. Some people hate Deep Space Nine, everything it's all about. Some people, except for Star Trek 5 being shit, I think other than that, there's no universal truths. I personally have a bias against Enterprise. It does not seem like Star Trek to me in the way that the other series seem like. The storytelling's fine, but even rewatching now, it seems to me like cosplay a little bit. Like it's not in the same universe as the other shows. So my lowest one is Countdown 0 Hour, because that was the one I was the most bored for, especially the part 2. I really enjoyed Countdown. I thought it was a good episode. The Xindi, the Enterprise crew attempted to stop the ultimate weapon. There's a lot of interesting things that happen in the episode. The first half, second half, I found myself trying to watch 2 or 3 times and falling asleep, partially because I think in every other series, and I've heard Bakula talk about this several times, I don't feel chemistry amongst the cast. I don't care enough about the characters. Archer is a really pig-headed asshole that I have no empathy for in any situation, and especially in this episode, I just blah. That's my number 25, and you're gonna find that all my lowest on my list are all the Enterprise episodes. My bottom 5 are all fucking Enterprise episodes. I just do not enjoy watching this series. I tried. Mark, God, fuck you. I love you. You're a nice guy, but damn you for making me watch Enterprise again. I thought I'd never have to watch these episodes again, but I love you for making me watch Voyager again, because now I'm starting a Voyager rewatch because I like it. But anyways,
well. I wanted to say about Enterprise is that I hated like the first 2 seasons. I thought they were absolute garbage, but I thought there was a lot of good in the 3rd and 4th season. And in fact, I will say about the 5 episodes that were highest ranked in Enterprise, I would say Enterprise was the only show out of all 5 of the shows where I actually liked each of the 5 episodes and thought that they picked. Like the 5 that were in there were all in my top 10 favorite Enterprise episodes. So I actually had them all ranked a lot higher. So you're going to ruin all that for me.
I know I'm going to ruin your, but I will say this, that the storytelling and the writing in the final 2 seasons is very much improved. I just don't like the characters.
I agree. The characters did hold it back. I do agree with you there, but I still think, like, particularly with these 2 episodes, which I had ranked at number 10. It was in my top 10 because I just love the way they handled the Xindi. I think the way they closed off the Xindi story arc really worked. Like, the Xindi reminded me a lot of the Dominion and how it was like a bunch of different factions, different aliens that all get equal play. And I love how they did it in a Star Trek way. It wasn't like, oh, this is the evil bad guy, we had to go blow them up. But did the Star Trek way. We had to negotiate. And it showed like the complexities, and it sort of related to reality, and sort of because it was a big like sort of Iraq War 9/11 metaphor. And it was saying, instead of just going there and fucking shit up, it's a complex political situation that we need to go in and negotiate. And I thought Enterprise actually did a good job with that. Okay. But anyway,
and I want to say something here because interestingly, this is also my number 10, and I
totally screwed you guys up on this.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand your sentiments for Enterprise, but why is this the worst one? This is my highest ranked Enterprise.
Do you know why? Because I found myself the most bored. I liked In the Mirror Dark. I mean, I'm not want to give up my list, but I liked In the Mirror Darkly. I liked the theme to it. I like because I thought it was a good parallel of. It was one of my favorite Mirror episodes. Twilight was my favorite of all the Enterprise episodes that I watched, and I liked Zero Fine. This episode, for some reason, just kind of the second half of it dragged for me a lot, and I had trouble keeping it too much.
I bet since you hate Enterprise so much, I bet you didn't rewatch the whole Xindi. Like, I watched the whole second half of season 3.
No, I did. No,
See,
I didn't.
Then that ruins it for you because you don't have the whole context.
Watching it out of context.
Yeah, you're watching it out of context. I thought and really, I put this as number 10 because I see it as a representation of the entire Xindi story arc, which was Enterprise growing up. Enterprise was an immature little child in the first 2 seasons. Enterprise grew up in the 3rd season, wrote really intelligent, smart, engaging storytelling. And
okay, I agree. I hear what you're saying with that, but I see through season 3. This is just, I thought this the first time. I agree with you because season 3 even more so has that Deep Space Nine-ness about it, where you watch an episode out of context. I agree. Maybe that was part of the reason why I had trouble connecting, but in general, and this is from the first time I watched it, I find season 4 to be, even leading up to that final episode anyways, to be tremendously better than season 3, because I think it was like season 3 was the trial that they had to go through to learn what kind of show they were, and season 4 becomes a little bit more interesting for me because it's not so centered on the Xindi, which I never personally connected with. But I do think that storytelling was on point. It's just not something I liked. Yeah. I didn't like it when it was on.
No. To me, it was like they looked at Deep Space Nine and said, look what a great thing they did. How can we adapt that for the Enterprise universe without totally just ripping it off, just putting it into the Enterprise world? And I saw a comment on one of Mark's Enterprise videos where somebody was like, "Oh, the Dominion would kick the Xindi's ass." Well, who cares? It's it's not. I mean, the Federation with Cisco would kick the shit out of the Starfleet with Jonathan Archer. It's all relative. I thought it was the perfect enemy for the Enterprise, and they were so interesting how there was 5 different species and how some of them were worse than others. It wasn't like they were all evil, and there was different complexities. I thought it was just really, really great storytelling.
And I like the time travel conclusion to it all, and how it all circles together. I thought that was, like I said a few times.
That's actually probably my least favorite part of it, but
I actually like how that all came together. I think Enterprise in general has pretty good storytelling.
All right. Okay, well, we should move on.
Yeah, we spent enough time on this. I think is good, but this is good. This is why it's good to do this, because we all have different opinions and we all.
Yeah, the stream's gonna be over. Like, let's not invite that Phil guy next time we talk about it.
No, it's all good. It's all good to have a different foil because, like, me and Akton were saying earlier, we knew each other so well. It's good to have a wild card in here that we don't know what's gonna happen. Cool. So let me move on to number 22, which was 23 on my list, and this is an episode I think is way overrated over time. The only reason why it's in this conversation is because they made a movie using the same villain. If they didn't make a movie using that villain, then nobody would remember this episode as much as they do anyway, and that's Space Seed. I mean,
softcore porn.
This episode was not bad, but it was okay. It was just like, it doesn't deserve to be in the conversation, in my opinion.
Well, Mark, You hit the nail on the head. This was also number 23 on my list, and I agree 100%. And that's all I need to really say.
Yeah, I would. Everything you said is true, Mark. I think it's an average episode. I just watched this episode earlier today. A tremendously average, decent episode of TOS. I don't even like Khan's performance in it compared to the movie performance. I think I just don't think it works. So yeah, I agree with pretty much everything you say. It's my lowest ranked original series episode too.
Oh, okay. And I will say, like, I heard somewhere that they were actually considering having Garth of Izar be the main villain of Star Trek II, but then they came up with Khan instead. And I actually liked that episode that he was in, Whom Gods Destroy, better. I actually wish they would have went with him, but Ricardo Montalban is the bigger name. So yeah. All right, cool. So yeah, let's just go ahead and move on to, I believe we're on up to number 21. Akton, it's your turn.
Okay, so number 21, this is actually number 24 on my list. And again, I didn't think this was a bad episode, but does it belong in this conversation? No. And this is a Voyager episode that I didn't remember if I had ever seen it before. I think that I probably saw it once many years ago. So when I just rewatched it, it was kind of like watching it new. And this is Living Witness. I just don't really get what the fuss is about this episode. To me, it was just like, let's have a Voyager crew in the mirror universe, but not actually have the mirror universe. And also the dude who was helping the doctor, I forget his name, he was turned way too quickly. It was unrealistic. I didn't buy it. I mean, imagine if you had been taught something your whole life. Imagine like the doctor comes to you and says, no, actually, Adolf Hitler was a good guy. Would you change your mind overnight? No. And the ending was just cheesy. I didn't like, yeah, I mean, I don't want to be too negative and say that I didn't like this episode. I just don't understand why it would be in a conversation of great episodes. It just doesn't really, like, next time, just have an actual mirror universe episode of Voyager rather than just making up some weak excuse for having them act all evil. So Living Witness, number 24, and I could tell by Mark's reaction that he doesn't agree.
I'm ready. I'm ready to. Mark, you want to go? You want to go?
This is number 13 on my list. I love this episode. I think like the whole like using alternate
13 on my list too, by the way.
13 as well. Yeah, like I think the whole thing about having an alternate version of the crew was only part of the fun. Like that was a nice little cherry on top. That was a nice little thing. The main point though is that commentary that makes about history and how messed up and confused this gets over years. And it's just such an original idea too, just to cold start the episode. It's actually not taking place in present times at all. It takes place like with this, the whole idea of a backup doctor was a bit ridiculous, but I forgive that because the episode was actually good. And so you actually don't see any of the main characters. It just takes place in some aside future. And I think that was a very risky, very ballsy move that really paid off. But go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say, like, I think part of the reason why it works for me too, in the level where it's away from the crew, is you depends a lot on the doctor who really works for me in that context. And I think that's why the episode's beloved, because it's the arguably, besides Boobs McBorg, the most beloved Voyager character in the Doctor from a general standpoint. Kevin Arnold's gym teacher there, and I think there's a lot of focus on him conveying the truth about what happened with Voyager. And I agree with Mark that it's an interesting story. Does it all work in execution? I agree with you, Akton, and something I didn't necessarily think about before, but the switchover is pretty quick. I think you're led to believe that this guy's always had doubts about the history books, but they don't make that clear enough in the narrative that you actually see on screen. If they had made it more clear, giving us a scene early where that guy's pulling a Superman's dad going, "You guys are wrong about everything," and like yelling at the board about history possibly being wrong, and then the doctor comes and verifies that point, it might have been more of a complete thought. But I actually enjoyed this Voyager episode a lot because it was an interesting perspective kind of episode, because I think history is written by the winners, and if you use that concept, it's good to see it visually depicted onto screen.
And I appreciate what it was going for there. That's why I didn't totally hate this episode. As I said, I enjoyed every single one of these episodes. I didn't think any of them sucked. And so I appreciate the message it was trying to convey, but when the scientist dude switched over so quickly, that took me out of it. That just made it hard for me to buy. And I also, full disclosure, I've never understood why the Doctor is so beloved. He's not my favorite Voyager character. And honestly, really full disclosure, other than Enterprise, Voyager is I have a higher opinion of Enterprise than Phil does, but it is my least favorite of the series. Voyager is slightly above that. I feel like Voyager has some great episodes. It has a couple of them in my top 10 here. So don't get me wrong. It has some great episodes, but as a series, I don't like it as maybe other people did. So though I do have those biases, I have an anti-Doctor bias and an anti-Voyager bias too.
No, and I'm with you right there with the anti-Voyager bias for the most part. My problem with Voyager more than anything, and still on this watch too, I think Voyager is the tale of like in the Bronx Tale, the worst story in life is wasted talent. And I think Voyager had so much potential for greatness that it never quite hit for so many different reasons, whether it's the omnipotent Janeway stuff or Neelix being pushed too much when he should have just been used for toilet paper, or whatever, however we want to break it down, the Doctor being too focused and kind of cheesy sometimes, the rest of the crew being useless for me. But like, so I'm with you. My Star Trek, whether our top is the same, the bottom two series are exactly the same. Voyager, I like a little bit more than Enterprise. I have more of an appreciation this time for Voyager because I forget that the great episodes of Voyager are great. And I think that's part of watching these episodes. I'm reminded how great, which leads into my next pick, which is another low Enterprise episode. So my next on my list.
Okay, good. I just had something to say real quick about the Voyager episode.
Oh, no, please, no worries.
Yeah. Because I was going to say, like, for me, I actually like Voyager better than the original series. I would rank it higher, but that's just me. But I also agree with Enterprise being low. But I will say, I just wanted to say real quick about this episode is when I did my Voyager top 10 video, I had so many comments saying, what about Living Witness? And to be honest, like, I wish I would have mentioned it as an honorable mention. It didn't quite crack my top 10, but I'd put it as an honorable mention. But anyway, Phil, go ahead. Name number 20 on our list.
Number 20 on our list, which is, oh God, this is so difficult. I like this episode, but I'm gonna say that because how invested I was in the story arc at the time, In the Mirror Darkly would probably is next on my list in number 20. I think it works for what it's trying to go. I like mirror episodes, but similar to what Akton was saying with Trials and Tribulations, I don't think it's the best mirror episode, so I have trouble having it too high on my list. When I guess Mirror is on there somewhere too, but which belongs there. Fuck my point. But I just it's an okay episode, but it's not one of my favorite episodes of season 4. I think it's really, really well done, but I just don't think it belongs on the top 25 list. Beyond, it needs to be in the 20s. So I'm gonna. That's In the Mirror Darkly. Good episodes though. Fun. I think let Bakula be a little bit more fun and show a little bit more of his range than he usually gets to playing Archer, and I think that's important. My least favorite part of Enterprise though is T'Pol, and any focus on her and her trying to play outside character. I don't know. She's dresses more stupid in the reality than she does in the mirror world. So, but my favorite part of this whole episode, though, because we're starting to get in, and Akton said this a couple of times. I said at the beginning too. I like all of these episodes, even the Enterprise episodes with the mind. I enjoyed watching through them again. The intro for this episode, what they do with the intro, I hate the fucking theme music, but the intro where they show you the alternate future of the intro with the human race, with Enterprise firing on the planet and stuff like that, is a really cool little touch. And I feel like Enterprise should have done stuff like that more and had a little bit more sense of humor to it all. It's something Bakula always did well in previous shows that he was in, and I feel like lacks a little bit. And you get it a lot in this episode.
Well, I was about to say, I had this episode ranked high on Enterprise for the simple fact that I didn't have to listen to that stupid ass, it's been a long time. But having that the whole opening with Zefram Cochrane and doing the different version, and then having that different, my mind was blown. I was like,
that was awesome. It was so awesome.
And I think the episode did get a bit cheesy from there, but I still enjoyed it. This was like number 18 on my list, so it's actually quite close to where I had it ranked. And it was a fun episode. I call this the ultimate fanboy episode. Like, this is where the writers were just, I think they knew the show was getting canceled. Fuck it, let's just have fun and throw in a lot of Star Trek references. And it was fun. It was a fun episode.
Yeah. I actually had this in number 17, so close to you, but I agree with everything you're saying, Mark. And in fact, I mean, we'll talk about Mirror Mirror later, but I have that pretty high. So I just I'm a sucker for the Mirror universe. I thought some of the later Deep Space Nine ones started to get a little silly, but this one I really enjoy almost anything in the Mirror universe. So, but I have it at number 17, so it's not one of the best.
Yeah. All right, cool. So let's go ahead and move on. I guess I am next. And I will say this was the lowest ranked Voyager episode for me. This was the one I saw on the Voyager list that stuck out like a sore thumb. Why is this episode here? It doesn't deserve to be here. And that's Message in a Bottle. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was okay. I mean, had Andy Dick going around and you talked about how you didn't like the Doctor. For me, this is one of the episodes that kind of overused. Let's have the Doctor being funny. You know, I did have this ranked as one of the funniest Star Trek episodes because I do think it is funny, but it's not like an overall good episode. It's just kind of average. And the real main thing that pisses me off about this episode, though, is this episode was aired during the Dominion War, and yet they had them go back to the Alpha Quadrant to fight the Romulans. Why not fight the Cardassians? That was the perfect opportunity to tie it into Deep Space Nine, but to have them fight the Romulans makes no sense. Why would Starfleet be fighting the Romulans during the Dominion War? They tried to like come up
Mark, do you want to know the real answer to that? Because there was another war going on between writing staffs of shows, and they didn't want to fucking work together. There was a competitive thing going on, and they, for some reason, Deep Space Nine was the, oh no, we can't do that war thing, right? Let's bust that into, let's get mentioned in one of the movies in the Next Generation. Worf, you're back from the Dominion War? Yeah, okay, Dominion War. Shh, shh, shh. Don't say anything about the Dominion War. Shh.
Like, they did mention the Dominion War in the episode, but still, that was just like a bone they're trying to throw. I mean, I understand they don't want to show Dominion because that's a Deep Space Nine villain, but the Cardassians, Voyager has done Cardassians all the time, so there's no reason why they couldn't have done Cardassians there. But anyway, that's my gripe.
So, on our collective list, are we at number 19?
Hold on, let me just double check.
Yes,
it was number 19.
Number 19 on our collective. This was number 21 on my list. So and the reason why I have it a little higher than Living Witness, just because of the comedy. Like I did enjoy the comedy, but yeah, great episode. No, not really. I mean, it's and the comic chemistry between Andy Dick and Robert Picardo. Robert Picardo was good. It was an entertaining episode, but it doesn't belong in a discussion of the best episodes.
No, and it's really funny. It's Andy Dick at the height of Andy Dick's funniness. I think it was right in the middle of his news radio run. If I might have the timing wrong, but I think it was like dead center news radio when Andy Dick was probably at his funniest and before he just became sort of like a butt of a joke sort of guy that's just hanging out at a party getting drunk that you're like, oh wait, is Andy Dick at this party? Oh, there he is. He's hanging out in the corner. But I agree. The comic timing between the two of them is good, but the thing I like most about this episode, and I have it ranked right in the same area that you guys have, is the continuation from the Bashir episode of Deep Space Nine, that this is the person that takes over when Bashir isn't, when they pass on Bashir because he's genetically enhanced. This is the next doctor that they go to, so it's almost in a weird, not a weird way, but a successor to that episode where it's continuation on the line of the Mach 2. So I enjoy that aspect of it, but I don't think it deserves to be on this list. I don't understand why it's even one of the best Voyager episodes.
Because it's the Doctor being funny, and people just rank it high. But anyway, so let's go ahead and move on to number 18. Akton, it's your turn.
Okay, it's number 18. This is number 22 on my list, and I raised the eyebrow when Phil said this was his highest ranked Enterprise, because this is my lowest ranked Enterprise episode. That is Twilight. I appreciate what they were attempting to do here. I've heard Mark call it it was like as if Yesterday's Enterprise in the movie Memento had a baby, which is a good description of it. But I actually, when I watched it, I was thinking of it in terms of the Star Trek universe, and I was thinking of it as kind of the Enterprise's version of Yesterday's Enterprise or Year of Hell, because both of those episodes as when the crew is at its lowest and just horrible things are happening and things are dire and everybody's going to die and things are horrible, and then the timeline has changed and things go back to normal. So I kind of thought of it in a trio with those other two episodes. And also I have those other two episodes ranked way higher than this. Where it fails is that in those other two episodes, they were really setting up good for what was going to happen in the end. You knew there was going to be a timeline change in Yesterday's Enterprise because the episode was about a timeline change. And Year of Hell was about aliens who were going around changing the timeline. So you knew it was really well set up for them. And here, when they said at the end, oh, when you cure the Archer's disease, it cures backwards in time. And I'm like, no, it doesn't. You just made that up. I mean, they did.
And it wouldn't work like that.
I mean, they did kind of threw in a little throwaway line earlier about how it's like related to the subspace or space-time continuum. I mean, they threw in a line about how it's a time phenomenon, but the episode wasn't about that up until that point. Now, I did appreciate some aspects of it. I did love the very Battlestar Galactica feel of it, where there's only 6,000 humans left, and I did appreciate it, but the time travel or the time change just felt really forced and contrived, like they're trying too hard to recreate Yesterday's Enterprise or Year of Hell. And I enjoyed this episode overall, but it falls well short of those other two episodes.
Do you know what I liked so much about it? Because I thought it was the closest that we got on Enterprise to some guy named Al coming out and go, Ziggy, Sam, we have a 68% chance of making this work. And I think it's my favorite Enterprise episode for selfish, really cheesy reasons of quantum leap love. Because I think there's one part where Archer says something about, we got to use the quantum something. I'm like, did he just say quantum? Is he going to quantum leap right here? Time travel? Wait, like there had to be some jokes going on the set of that. Dean Stockwell was showing up at set, calling on his cell phone, going, Sam. But I liked it just because this is funny. Like I haven't checked it out yet. I can't wait to watch it because you guys have mentioned it a couple of times. The time travel, one of these that you guys did. Because I tend to just shut my brain off to stuff like that. I go, oh yeah, this is fucking time travel. It's cool. I mean, in certain movies, you mentioned Genesis, whatever. Fuck that movie. But but I kind of like this, and I like the conclusion I like how this culminates the whole arc. And I remember watching it the first time and feeling very awesome, and had just a good feeling at the end of this episode. This was one of my for my first watch of Enterprise when it was first on, one of my most enjoyable episodes, and it brought back a nostalgic feeling watching it again this time.
Cool. Yeah, so this was number 14 on my list, so I guess I liked it slightly more. This was actually the highest ranked episode on IMDb. And I think, I totally agree with all your criticisms, Akton, but I just doesn't bother me as much because to me it's outweighed by the cool episode, like the dark episode of humanity being on its last leg that you talked about already. And just having and I like the character relationship between T'Pol and Archer. I thought this was played out really well, and they kind of teased out a romance without it coming off as cheesy, which in any normal situation it would. So I have to give the show props for doing that as well. And this wasn't my lowest ranked Enterprise episode. We haven't even gotten to my lowest ranked Enterprise episode yet, but maybe you're about to name it now, Phil. So let's go ahead, and your turn to do number 18.
Okay, my number 18 on my list. I was 17.
Almost
17 on my list. I almost was going to make an audible here. And,
well, no, you're going for the lowest on your list, like the lowest.
Right, the lowest on my list. But I was almost going to bring 17. One. I was almost going to bring one from one step higher. Now that I'm really starting to think about things, but no, I'm gonna stick with my guns, and I'm gonna mispronounce the name of this episode. And the next one on my list is Zadie Prime. I could just correct my Azadi Prime.
Yeah.
I just found Archer to be so stupid in this episode that I couldn't enjoy it. That's really what it comes down to. I have my notes written down. I don't have my notes, but I remember writing down in capital letters, Archer, you are a fucking idiot. It establishes the Klingons, and it shows how like a lot to do with, you know, like the Federation bonding and stuff like that. But I just find Archer, just because this is one of those episodes that I think that this statement is really true. People play poker, they make stupid mistakes in poker, and they win a hand, and they think that they played good poker. If you make a stupid mistake and it works out, it doesn't. It's still a freaking stupid mistake, and people think, and it allows your stupidity to make you think that works, and it enhances it. You're like, oh, that stupid works. Let me try this, and that's Archer in a nutshell. Stupid shit works out for him, and I mean, he gets beat, and he can take a beating better than almost any captain. But I don't know. This episode's it's the bumbly captain falling into a success story here. And I think he just makes so many dumb mistakes that end up working out in this episode. But yeah.
So Phil, you did indeed name my lowest ranking Enterprise episode. Because like I like this episode. I did put it in my top 10, so I did really enjoy this episode. But I think like this episode is it's a cliffhanger, and the following episode is Damage, which is it's my number one favorite Enterprise episode, and it didn't make the list. So it was a bit sour.
Much better episode.
It was a bit sour that this episode made the list and the other one did, because this episode was okay. I don't think it was the greatest thing ever. It did sort of raise the tension, and the ending was really super really like, you know, you thought Enterprise was going to get destroyed, so it was a super ending. But as an episode overall, I mean, I loved it, but I think there were much more deserving episodes.
Yeah, and this was actually my next ranked Enterprise episode. This was number 20 on my list. And similar to another episode we're going to get to later, this was the beginning of kind of a long story arc, and I feel like that this was maybe the 4th or 5th best episode in that story arc. That's why I'm just still in shock that the 0 hour countdown was before this, because it's infinitely better. Those two episodes are infinitely better than this one. Not that this one is bad. I just don't think I don't see what's so great about it. And I 100% agree with Mark that it's just a travesty that Damage was left off of this. I mean, it was like a year of hell, except there's no timeline change. Like, that's just it. Like, their ship is just fucked up. I mean, Damage is the best episode of Enterprise, and it's just a shame that this one got chosen over that one.
Yeah. You're making a point. You're almost making me want to petition to Mark to switch my 2 picks here. Actor, you make a good point. At the end, do we get to canvas for certain episodes to be changed in the list?
This list is written in stone right now.
I fucked it up. I fucked it all up.
Nah, it's all good. Okay, cool. So let us move on. Hold on.
Good time.
1 second. So we're at number 16. Oh, wow. We're progressing along. This was number 21 on my list. So it's coming in a lot higher than I had it. And this is another episode I think is way overrated, and that is The Trouble with Tribbles, which in fact, I just watched this episode like earlier this morning while I was killing time, and it actually, watching again, fresh in my mind, it's even less funny than I remember. Maybe, I don't know, that could be because I've seen it too many times, but I think it's mainly the 60s humor doesn't come off as well, and it reminds me of like an episode of The Brady Bunch, that type of humor. Like, the jokes are a bit too like obvious, and like, Kirk would never just stand there and let all these tribbles fall on him. Like, the way the scene, it just didn't seem realistic, and they were playing it too close for like, oh, look at the tribbles. No, it's not a bad episode. I don't hate it. I did find it a bit funny. I like how it had all 7 characters, very few original series episodes do, and the chemistry between them worked. But other than that, there's not much to it.
Well, this episode,
Scotty's the best part.
Yeah. This episode to me was a favorite when I was a little kid, and it was introduced to me by my mom, who loved it when she was also a kid. So to me, it's like a kid's episode. I mean, it's not grown-up Star Trek. I mean, it's, you know, I still have some nostalgia attached to it, which is why I made it all the way up to number 18 on my list, just purely for nostalgia alone. But it's not really, come on. It's like, look at the intelligent, thought-provoking episodes from Deep Space Nine, Next Generation, and even Voyager to an extent, even Enterprise. I mean, and compared to this, I mean, yeah, it's it's a children's episode, and the rest of us are watching grown-up Star Trek, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. It's so difficult, though, because I agree with you. In fact, when I said I want to maybe make an audible, I was thinking about putting this one lower on my list a couple times. But the problem is, if you ask someone that's not a Star Trek fan what they know about Star Trek, they'll say Spock, live long and prosper, and Tribbles will be one of those things. I think that's the only reason why it gets all these votes on something like IMDb, because it's just one of those things that everybody knows, and it's not even a big part of Star Trek. It's almost one of those things that before I was a huge Star Trek fan, I knew about Tribbles first. Like, Tribbles were beam me up, Scotty. Tribbles were the first things you heard about with Star Trek. And then when you get in there, you're like, Scotty only says beam me up, or he only says beam me up, Scotty, like twice. And Tribbles are like hardly ever there unless you go to the animated series. And I think the coolest aspects of Tribbles is the fact that the Klingons went out and hunted them down and killed them, because Worf in Trials and Tribulations speaks my mind about Tribbles. Fuck Tribbles. They're the most overrated part of all of Star Trek.
Definitely. Cool. All right. So
Mugwise are cooler. Mugwise are fucking cooler.
I mean, they're basically just based off like a cat purring. That's all they're just big balls of purr. Anyway, let's move on to number 15. We're down to the top 15. So Afghan, your turn to name number 15.
Okay, so number 15 on our collective list is actually number 19 on mine. And this is getting back to what I mentioned about Azadi Prime. It was like kind of the first of a story arc, and I didn't think it was the best in that story arc, and that is Call to Arms. It was a good introduction to the story arc with when they take over, the Cardassians take over the station, but give me Sacrifice of Angels like a gazillion times over. I mean, the ending with Gold Dukat and his daughter, I mean, this one was okay, but it was like just kind of a setup episode for really everything else. It wasn't really I enjoyed it. I just didn't think it was. I would put 2 or 3 episodes in that story arc above this one. So
I see Phil freaking out there, but I wanted to jump in real quick and say, if you didn't name this episode next, I would have. This was the next one on my list as well, number 19. Because yeah, I totally agree with everything you're saying. Sacrifice of Angels, Behind the Lines, Favor the Bold, and Rocks and Showers. All of those are much better episodes to represent this arc. Where this one was it was suspenseful. It was like, but there was a couple of flaws in this episode, logical flaws, like the whole. But I talked about in some other videos about the whole.
Yeah, like the whole thing with the roundabouts and stuff like that. Like when the roundabouts.
What's Starfleet going to sending? Oh, we can't send any ships to defend Deep Space Nine because they're off on this other important mission. What's more important than the fucking wormhole? Nothing is more important than the wormhole. That's so.
And we can't tell you about it. So it's a MacGuffin at the end of the episode. But that being said, guys, you guys got your revenge, because this was number 2 on my list. Number 2 all time Star Trek episode. Number 2, because I love this episode simply for the fact of, there's a lot of reasons why I love this episode, but my main reason why I love it is because it showed me and it proved to me that Deep Space Nine was a different kind of series. I mean, it had done that before this point, but leading up to this point, the bad guys, even though we did get ultimately, by the end of the episode, I'm sorry, trying to get my screen together here. By the end of the episode, we did get that it was a bittersweet victory for the bad guys, so to speak. But the fact that we ultimately got a win by the bad guys just was so intense and so antithesis of what we usually get out of a Star Trek story, except minus, say, Best of Both Worlds and maybe the end of Family too, where Picard is kind of left where nothing's ever going to be all right with him. I really love the sense of dread in this episode. And I think maybe part of it as well, because you guys make some excellent points about better episodes to come. But I maybe, for my purposes of this list, projected all of this story arc onto this episode. And this episode is the first domino that falls that allows that whole story arc to happen. And to me, one of the best, if not the best, group of episodes ever on any Star Trek series ever. So I need to give this episode as that starting point the credit for everything, for the risks it was willing to take by almost resetting the deck on Deep Space Nine. And at the end of this episode, leaving me with that, how long is it going to be like this? Is this really what's happening right now? Why is Jake such a stupid dumbass? I mean, all these questions and more. And so I really love
why. And why did Gold Dukat and Wyun just let Jake wander around the station? Like, he's the son of the freaking captain of your freaking enemy. Oh, he's a journalist, but you won't even let his journalist work go out. So why is he not in prison? Or at the very least, he should have been sent back to Bajor. Like, there's no reason for him to be on the station. Oh, ho hum, I'm just going to my resistance meetings. Don't mind me. I'm the son of Captain Sisko. I mean, what the hell?
Oh my goodness. But yeah, that's one of the most unbelievable things in the entire story arc of all of Deep Space Nine. That's Jake wasn't killed. Like, Jake should have been killed, or at least imprisoned.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that you do make a lot of good points, and I totally agree. If you're looking from the perspective of it really it was like really something original, really huge turning point for Deep Space Nine. But so if I look at it as an event, I see it as an important television event, but as an episode itself, I just think, again, there are no bad episodes. It was number 19 on my list, which is actually
totally.
A lot of good episodes. So it's definitely a good episode, but I just think there are better options to choose from. But anyway, cool.
It all evens out.
That was number 15. So Phil, you can name another Enterprise episode for it to be number 4.
This is tough. Right. So that was number 15. This is my favorite.
Excuse me a second. No, I just want to announce to you guys, I'm going to have to disappear for a second, so I will be right back.
Okay.
So if you come to me and it's a blank screen, I will be back in just a second, but you guys continue. I will pick up as soon as I get back.
Okay, cool.
I just want to jump into the live chat for a second. Carlos says Voltaire wrote a great song about that, Tribbles. Okay, so my next episode here is the Enterprise. This is the best episode, or the best episodes on this list of Enterprise. I really enjoyed these 3 episodes, this particular arc. I just thought it was a lot of fun. And one of those things that makes Enterprise great. I think there's not much bad I can say about the storyline. I think the Forge was. I really enjoy learning more about the Vulcans and developing more inside that kind of relationship as something that I feel like was explored to a decent extent, as much as they could on TOS. And this is where I agree with you, Mark. It's tough to look at TOS. I try to look at the TOS episodes as more concepts, not actual how they looked development-wise in the final process. So I feel like this was probably one of the best deep dives into a Vulcan situation that we get. I like all the desert scenes, and I like the relationship with Archer and T'Pol, and I like the dynamic that the two of them have. This was at the point in season 4 when I originally watched it where I'm like, oh my goodness, this is Enterprise is getting good. And this is also the point where I think around the time where I found out, or just you could just tell it was going to get canceled. And I got sad about it too, because I think this episode shows the kind of storytelling that Enterprise could have done if it was allowed to get the 7 seasons like the other series got. I think the end half, those final bunch of years of Enterprise could have been really, really good. And I think this episode is a good demo of that, or litmus test of it, because these 3 episodes flow so well together. It could have been more than these 3 episodes too. I don't know. It's just a lot of great stuff going on in these episodes.
Yeah, so this was number 11 on my list. So this was another one of my. I think this is like when I said I agree with the choices chosen. IMDb chose for Enterprise. I totally think about this episode. I think it totally deserves to be up there. I think it is one of my favorite Star Trek episodes from any series. And one thing, like, you talk about the backdrop and learning more about the Vulcans, and also I think it's sort of the show course correcting itself, because the whole first 2 seasons, which were total garbage, where they had the Vulcans play as assholes, here they actually turned that into a storyline by ending that and say, oh, this is why they were acting like assholes, because they were corrupt, and now we're going to end it so they're not going to be like assholes anymore. And so this is like Enterprise sort of course correcting itself. And also I love how how they just threw in, especially this is in 2005, where the Iraq War was like very popular, and they threw in an Iraq War protest. This whole episode, like if you didn't pick up on it, the Vulcan like prime minister's whole thing is to start a war by claiming the other sides have weapons of mass destruction when they don't really, and just for political purpose. And I love how they snuck that in, and that actually went over the heads of a lot of people. So yeah, that's my personal thing.
Yeah, so I really love these episodes too. I loved them when they first aired as well. And this is number 14 on my list. And it would have ranked even higher if not for one glaring flaw. And since you guys said all the positive things, and I'll just echo those, I agree with all the positive things. I want to point out the flaw that this would have been a top 10 episode, probably my best Enterprise episode. But the one flaw gets me, and that is, okay, so we find out at the end that the Vulcan, spoilers, I mean, this is like 20 years old, so whatever. We find out at the end that the Vulcan Prime Minister dude is actually a Romulan, which makes sense because he was acting like a freaking Romulan the whole time. Like, how could they not notice this? Like, there should be a deleted scene somewhere where he's just like, and Romulus will take over the universe. And all the Vulcan dude would be like, wait, what? What'd you say? Oh, nothing. I didn't say anything at all. I thought you said something about Romulus. Oh, no, that wasn't me. Oh, you must have been imagining. I mean, that scene would have fit in perfectly with this. I was like, come on, he's not even the tiniest bit logical. How do people buy this guy as a Vulcan? He rose to the highest level of office in the Vulcan government, and he's not even the tiniest bit logical. So that held this episode back from being a top 10 to being number 14. But otherwise, I love this episode. But I just had to throw that out there.
I think that is a valid criticism, but I would say in defense of that is like during this time period, the Romulans were not very well known. They're more known to Vulcans as like this sort of historical things. They hadn't made themselves known, like Starfleet and Endurance.
Right. Sure, but take the Romulans out of it and pretend. I mean, even I was going to make this criticism before I even remembered that he was a Romulan at the end. He still is not the tiniest bit logical. He's not acting like a Vulcan at all. So even if you don't know anything about the Romulans, how do you accept this guy as the Vulcan leader?
Yeah, I mean that is a good point, but again, I think
And Mark, one connection back to what you were saying earlier about the early seasons with the Vulcans. I feel like what Enterprise failed at more the worst in those two seasons was, as much as Deep Space Nine, for instance. I know I compare everything to Deep Space Nine. In those first couple of seasons, the way we learned about the Bajorans at times might have seemed slow. It still maintained itself to be interesting, and sometimes the Bajorans were assholes. I didn't care about them and all sorts of stuff, but they still maintained to keep a sense of adventure, keep a sense of fun. I think the biggest problem Enterprise has in those first seasons that the later seasons succeed on is that sense of adventure, that sense of fun, and I think it's very much present in these episodes. And it actually feels like Star Trek to me, and they feel like Vulcans, and I don't know, and I couldn't always say that for Enterprise.
Totally. Okay, so that was number 14, was it?
Oh, was it? That was okay. That was actually exactly where that landed on my list. That's 14.
Nice,
so that worked out.
Okay. I guess I believe it's my turn now, and you know, Akton, you knew this was coming. It's gonna piss everyone off, ruin everyone's top 10s. This was number 17 on my list again. Really great episode. I love these episodes, just not as much as everyone else.
I'm scared.
I know what this is. Go ahead.
The best of both worlds.
Fuck! wait, Mark, are you talking about part 2? Are you talking about part 2? Is that
no? We're talking about the whole thing.
Talking about both of them because here's the thing. Like part 1, I love this. Is a good episode. Like it's a good action, like fun. Federation is in jeopardy, but again, when I look at it from in the retrospect, looking at everything, I don't think it ages quite as well as some of the other Next Generation episodes because Next Generation does drama best. It doesn't really do action best. So episodes like Inner Light and Darmok to me stand the test of time. Where this, like, because Deep Space Nine and even Enterprise does like sort of action war better than this episode, I believe. And we're talking about the first part. I didn't really care for Shelby as a character or her whole story arc with Riker. And the second part, to me, was a bit of a letdown. But again, I know I'm hearing sneers. I know everyone disagrees. That's just the way I see it.
So wait, this was a spite pick? Was this the spite acted? Was this pick?
No.
This is
kidding.
How he feels about it. This is how I
believe you. I'm not questioning your belief. Okay, I would agree. I would agree with something, and I know you guys have had this, and I'm just going to get out of the way here. Let me say a couple things, and then I'll get out of the way for Akton here to go at Mark. This was number, I think, 4 on my list. I think it gets thrown off because I agree with you. I find the second half tremendously less interesting from the first half. I think it's how the episode was put together. I think they weren't sure how they were going to finish it. If I remember correctly, they thought Patrick Stewart might not come back, so they were thinking about killing him, so they hadn't planned out the second half of the episode before they filmed the first half, some shit like that. I don't necessarily love Shelby either, but I think it's probably Jonathan Frakes' best episode, and I think he really carries the storyline well in a way that he doesn't usually. And I appreciate all the little subtle tones to his acting in it. And I feel like it's the most threatening, when the way the Borg come back, it being the prototypical villain of the Next Generation cast. There's a lot to it. Not enough Picard for my taste. You were talking about episodes with action. I really like Chain of Command. I would have liked to see Chain of Command in the top list. I think that's an action episode that ages a little bit better than this one. But in general, I think you're a hater a little bit. The music in this episode is maybe the best of all the series. To point to
I just want to emphasize that. I want to emphasize a positive that I actually I actually thought that the Riker storyline, like a lot of people talk about this as Picard's episode, which I disagree. I think this is Riker's
Picard
episode.
has nothing to do.
And I think his storyline plays out really well because he goes to this arc of learning to be captain where he's afraid to step out of the shadow. And I think what would have made this episode way better, which of course this episodic series would never do, is if Riker actually got promoted to captain at the end. But of course that would fuck up the rest of the series, so they couldn't do that. But as the story, I think that would have made it better, but still, I think
you can't give the new captain to the Love Boat, Mark. There has to only be one captain.
All right.
Sorry, Akton.
Let me have my say on this. Okay, so first of all, this was in consideration for my number 1, but I did not put it in my number 1 specifically because I wanted to have a chance for my number 1 to actually be number 1, and I knew that there was no way it would last to number 1 with Mark in the mix. So I put it at number 2 and chose something that I like equally as much as my number 1. And so yeah, and I just don't have any criticism. I disagree with the criticism that the second part was worse. And it is true that they didn't know what they were doing. They didn't know how they were going to finish it, which makes the second part even that much more impressive to me because they really pulled it off, not knowing how they were going to end it when they started the thing. So I also disagree with the Shelby criticisms I see in here. Somebody else, who was it? Someone else said Shelby is annoying. Vincent Adultman said that Shelby's annoying. I can see where that would come from, but I thought she worked well for what her purpose in the episodes were, which was to be a foil to Riker. I thought that she fit that mold very, very beautifully, and I can understand where the Shelby is annoying criticisms are coming from, but I think she played her role really well. And it's definitely a great Riker episode, but then at the end, kind of Picard really steals his thunder because Picard is ultimately the one who is able to save the ship because he's able to somehow break through his Locutus programming.
Sleep.
Data, sleep.
I think the captain needs some sleep.
I do not believe his message was meant to express fatigue. Rather, just the course of action.
You're useless. You're useless. Stop.
All right, so I just wanted to.
The only thing I want to say about the Shelby situation is I think the only problem and the reason why I find Shelby annoying is because I think Riker has shown himself to be more of, and I mean, I just think she's a little bit of that, convenient tool in the episode to have someone to challenge Riker in the sense that he's the expert of the Borg. He was on the Borg ship. He's encountered them. And in every situation, she's kind of undercutting him. But I think where it works and where I agree with you, Akton, is Frakes plays it so fucking well. And the way he goes at her and the way he cuts her off, everything is so real, is so true to life when you're in situations like that in work or with other people. And the way he's kind of in that dynamic in the episode is very relatable, and I think adds a interesting dynamic to a very big episode if you look at the ultimate conclusion, and that's why it's so hard. It was, like I said, it was 3 or 4 in my 4 on my list, and I love it so much because of how relatable it is, and I think that's one of the reasons why I think it stands the test of time. To disagree a little bit with Mark, I think those real life relationships, I know what's better for your career. Why are you staying here? You need to go. Like all those elements of it, I think are very well done.
I just wanted to point out real quick that OG Lock in the chat says, I agree, Best of Both Worlds, way overrated episode. Thank you, OG. So glad that somebody out there disagrees.
Yeah. So now there are 2 people who are really wrong.
I know I'm a minority, but I'm not going to lie and pretend I love this episode.
Yeah, nor should you.
Nor should you, yeah.
Okay, cool. So, yeah, that was me fucking things up. All right, so now we're up to number 12.
We all did it once, Mark. We all did it once.
So, Akton, number 12.
Okay, so ultimately I am going to get my revenge on Mark, but not on this go-around.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it'll have to wait till my next go-around because there's one episode that I have lower on my list than the one that's going to ruin Mark's. And that's number 16 on my list, Balance of Terror.
Oh, that kind of ruins me a little bit.
Yeah, I went back and rewatched this, and I mean, I don't know. I guess I don't really have any specific complaints about it. I just found that there were 15 episodes I like better. I mean, that's really why it's number 16. It's just never, it's not something I have nostalgia for. First of all, because when I was a kid, I found this episode to be really boring. I didn't get it, so I didn't really really grow to appreciate it until I grew up and went back and rewatched it. And I don't know. There's just something about the classic Trek series that just holds it back for me. I can't really explain why it's number 16 on my list, other than say,
is it Spock's dad being the Vulcan? Is it Sarek?
No. I mean, it's fine. This is a perfectly fine episode. I just happen to like 15 episodes on our list better. So that's all I can really say.
This was number 3 on my list.
Oh,
I really love this episode, and I loved it more on this rewatch. When we first got our assignment and got the list, when I was making my my TOS episodes, this was one I didn't necessarily remember it by title, just for whatever reason. So I wasn't sure about it, and I watched it, and I agree. When I watched it as a kid, I was a little bit bored by it. On this watch through, I just found all sorts of other corners for it. Really got into the dynamics, sort of tried to ignore the music and the time period, sort of some of the aesthetic values that make it kind of cheesy at times, and I just really fell into the whole cat and mouse game of it all, the whole excitement of it. I think this is one of Shatner's best performances, the life he puts in it, the excitement he puts in it, his mannerisms, the back and forth between just the looks on all their faces as they're discovering everything. Spock's reaction with the discovery of it being the Romulans. I just found so much that laid the groundwork for so much to come for Next Generation through the whole Romulans. And I'm always been a pretty big fan of the Romulans when they're done right, minus Tasha Yar and Tasha Yar's daughter and stuff. But so I really like this episode. I understand it. We're all talking about episodes we all have a lot of love for. This one just happened on this watch through, really clicked with me, and this was very high on my list.
Yeah, this was actually number 16 on my list. So it was the one I was going to name next as well. And I think, 16 is actually good. Like, this is one of my favorite original series episodes. I've loved it ever since I was a kid. Just, again, it's like sort of what Akton says. It just happens to be 15 episodes I just like better. I mean, they're all good. And I will add to it is that thing I love about this episode is how adult and mature it is about war. It sort of gives you another another spin where I love how Kirk and the Romulan commander like appreciate each other. They try to kill each other because that's their roles, and they know that's the roles that they have to play, but they don't underestimate each other. And you see some other Romulans. This is the thing. I love how we get scenes of the Romulans on the Romulan ship. We see their perspective and how the captain's actually not just evil mustache twirling guy. You can see he's just like Kirk, but he's just has a different role to play.
Yeah, and I love that episode, aspect of this episode as well. I think the thing that holds it back for me just a tiny bit is how I thought they were just going a little bit over the top, where he was like, we could be friends in another life. You don't know. You've never even seen what he looks like. So that was a tad bit laying it on a little thick. But overall, it's not that bad.
I mean, but this is the original series. They always lay things on.
Yeah. And I just want to throw out this random tidbit of information that the little light bulb came up when, and maybe you guys already know this and be like, oh, everybody knew that. But because I watched this episode, and then I did my season 4 review where I went through of Next Generation, where I went through every Next Generation episode of season 4 and reviewed it. And it just dawned on me for the first time that when Picard is marrying Keiko and O'Brien, he uses the exact same speech word for word that Kirk uses when he's marrying those whoever those people were. You knew that dude was going to die. I mean, it was like, oh, they're getting married. They have to run out in the middle of their wedding because of a red alert. That dude's dead. But it was word for word the same speech. I was like, oh, I never noticed that before.
Yeah, I would say what you said. I would say, so I'm not going to say it. But yeah, yeah. Cool. All right. Okay, so I believe it is Phil's turn to do number 11. I think we're all out of Enterprise episodes finally.
No, we are, and I'm going to my list now because now we're getting into all episodes I generally really like. This episode, and I mean, and like I said, I'm having fun with it with Enterprise. I don't hate it. I don't hate this series either, and it's kind of hard because at this point, it's like I'm rationalizing trying to come up with bad things about episodes to rationalize its placement on the list, but we're just talking about really good episodes here. And this one is Blink of an Eye from Voyager. I really love this episode. There's just a bunch of episodes I liked better than this one. It's a story, one of those sci-fi stories that's been done many times in many different places, and it's effective and does its job well. I don't have much to say about this episode other than I enjoyed it, but it's not one of my favorite Voyager episodes, and it was just the one that came up right now. I like this episode. It's a good episode, but it's an average Voyager episode for me. It's not. I don't even think there's ones that not mentioned that I think are better.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're at the point now where we don't have to say negative things about the episode. Like, we have to acknowledge that all these episodes are great. But yeah, what do you want to talk, Akton?
I actually disagree that this is just an average Voyager episode. I think this does deserve to be one of the top 5 Voyager episodes. And in fact, on IMDb, didn't you say it was the number 1 rated episode?
It was the number 1.
Yeah, which I wouldn't go that far, but I do believe it deserves to be one of the top 5 Voyager episodes. But we're at number 11 on our collective list, and this actually falls at number 12 on mine, so right on line with where I had it. I love this episode. There was 11 episodes I liked better than it. So we're getting into a good tier. And I got to mention Daniel Day Kim, Jen from Lost, making an appearance. Who also, I don't remember which episode it was, but I remember one of my former roommates, I walked in the living room and she was watching Enterprise, and Jen pops up on the screen as some like no-name ensign dude. So he was also, Daniel Day Kim was also in Enterprise. But so yeah. No, I love this episode. Just happens to be 11 other episodes I love more.
Yeah, this was number 7 on my list, so this is another breach into the top 10 for me. I love it.
One more into the breach.
Yeah, but again, I don't begrudge you for putting this at 11 because again, we're getting to the best of the best, and but I personally like this episode. It's just very interesting from a science fiction perspective, like the world that goes to the time or fast, and I thought they played it concept, they played it very well on a character, on a personal character basis. Like, I'd actually love to see somebody write a novel or something about the Doctor's time that he's on the planet.
I think there is, Mark. Let me get back to you on this, but I want to say this is based on like a books on a sci-fi story or something like that. So you might have your wish. Let me look into that.
No, I mean like about a Star Trek novel about this episode about the
okay, yeah,
about the time that the Doctor spent on the planet, because he was on the planet for like 4 years or so or something. He had he said he had a kid and they never got. And I think there's a lot of like interesting backstory to reach into that. But yeah, I think this episode played out very
We're going to talk about that later with the Picard episode. He learned how to play a flute. Some shit was going on.
Oh yeah, we'll get to that later.
You'll get to that later.
All right, cool. So before we move on, I just want to recap what our list is so far. Our collective list, and this is the definitive list now, remember, because we're the Star Trek experts. And number 25 is Q-Who, 24 Trials and Tribulations, 23 Countdown and 0 Hour, 22 Space Seed, 21 Living Witness, 20 In the Mirror Darkly, 19 Message in the Bottle, 18 Twilight, 17 Azadi Prime, 16 The Trouble with Tribbles, 15 Call to Arms, 14 Kirshara Forge and Awakening, 13 Best of Both Worlds, 12 Balance of Terror, and 11 Blink of an Eye. Okay, so who went last? Blink of an Eye. That was you, Phil, right? So it's my turn.
Yes, yes, it's your turn.
So I'm glad that episode Atkins about the name next at least made it to the top 10. Anyway, let me go with this was number 15 on my list. And again, this is all good episodes.
I know exactly what episode you're going to name. I bet you I do. Go ahead. I think I do. Maybe I'm wrong. Go ahead.
Maybe I'm wrong. Man.
Yep, I'm right.
Like, I did a review on this. I gave it a 9 out of 10. I think it was my favorite episode of the second season of Next Generation, but of course the second season was pretty shit, so that's not too high praise, but it is a good Next Generation episode. I don't quite feel it deserved to be on the IMDb top 5. I think there are a lot of other Next Generation. I can't believe All Good Things wasn't in it. What the hell is wrong with people? Anyway, but it's still a good episode. Like, I don't begrudge it. I still think it's a great sort of, again, I think it was the best episode from these first 2 seasons when the show really started to get good writing, good acting, Patrick Stewart showing off his chops, and this drama story. So yeah, good things about this episode. But yeah, it ranked at number 15 for me.
Okay, this was number 11 on my list, so we're at number 10 on the real list, so I'm right on par with it. And yeah, you know what, I probably eventually I'm going to do my top 10 Next Generation. Actually, I'm going to do a top 25 video eventually, but and this probably will not be in my top 5. And yet, since it's on here, I can't help but rank it highly. Like, I would probably put Tapestry, which Phil listed earlier, All Good Things, and probably a few others. And yet
there are 4 lights.
Yeah, and that one too, and that one too. And yet, this is the best episode of the first 2 seasons. You're absolutely right. This is when Star Trek was starting to grow up a little bit, or Next Generation was starting to grow up a little bit, and where I have complained before that I feel like by the end of the series, Data's story is the most overtold story of any character. I mean, he has more relatives than anybody else, and he's just a freaking android. But this was before all of that. This was really where the Data episodes were still fresh and new, and this was such a really well done. The way that they played out this debate, you could see kind of both sides of it. Even though you do side with Data because you've been following it for 2 seasons, and
that other guy's a dick.
Yeah, and the other guy's a dick. But yeah, but it was really well done, and it was also just a badass Picard moment, like at the end. Just the way that he stands up for Data and his whole speech at the end was fantastic. So definitely one of the favorite episode of the first 2 seasons, and I love this episode. So number 11 on my list.
You guys have said it a couple of times. It's definitely the best episode of the first 2 seasons, but I think in Q, who we mentioned earlier, which is also a season 2 episode, I believe, I think season 2 episodes and season 1 episodes belong nowhere on that list. I think Next Generation, season 3 and onward, is just a better show. I think any episode, any season, and I know she isn't in Q-Who, so this doesn't pertain to her. There shouldn't be 2 Pulaski era episodes in the top 5. There's 5 episodes, and 2 of them are Pulaski era episodes. There's a fucking problem here. I love Measure of a Man. I don't want to open up a can of worms, but I'm a huge Westworld fan, and I think this deals with some similar concepts of like what's the nature of artificial life. And I think when I talked about Westworld a lot this season, I referred to this episode. I'm not opening up that can of worms with you, Akton, or you, Mark, right now to talk about that. Sure, that's a different podcast altogether. But I had to say it, though. But because I do think about that a lot when I watch this episode. But I don't think it deserves to be in the conversation. I think the most emotional moment in the episode, though, for me, and the moment that gets me a little every time, is when he's explaining the relationship between him and Tasha, and that he had a special relationship with Tasha that always touches me a little bit. And also, any moments that we can see any of Picard's life before he got to the Enterprise is kind of cool, and to see his relationship with the Admiral is an interesting dynamic that we have. But for the most part, it still suffers from a lot of those season 2, season 1 overacting kind of moments, and it's one of those episodes that when you watch it back and you watch it all Next Generation as a whole, I wish it was a season 4 episode, and I think it would have been a better episode as a season 3 or season 4 episode. If you take everything else, it's just the show wasn't at that level yet, so it's not quite everything it could be. But it is a great season 1, season 2 episode.
Yeah, I don't want to. You open up the can of worms. I don't want to get too much into it, but this did come out 25 years before Westworld. Is all I'm saying.
Right.
Like this was the pioneer.
Not the book.
Me.
Not
like
the book.
This is. I mean, there were probably other things before this that I'm not familiar with. That's drug. I mean, you can look at Isaac Asimov novels from the 50s, and they struggle with this kind
right.
of. Yeah, but as far as like mainstream television and movies, this was really like the first, and it did it really, really well. So yeah, I will always love this episode.
Yeah.
Okay, so real quick, I just want to apologize if you guys are hearing bird noises. I'm just a bit too hot, so I need to open the window. I know that both of you probably play the world's smallest violin for me, but it's summer here, so I'm a bit too hot. I need to open the window anyway. So
I actually have a little heater underneath.
Jump in the chat. Yes, Vincent. Westworld's a making. There was a 70s movie with Yul Brynner.
Right, but if you're going to remake something in 2016...
Oh, no, I was reading from the chat.
Yeah, right. If you're going to remake something from 2016 that was made in the 70s, then you're taking into account everything that's come before it. So, yeah, I don't know. But anyway.
Let's move on to number 9, which I'm pretty sure what you're going to say, Akton. Go ahead.
Okay, and this is number 13 on my list. And again, I don't have anything negative to say about this. This is a great episode. I just have 12 episodes I like better than it. And it's just, and the difference between me and Mark is I don't have the deep personal connection and history with it that he has, because I didn't immediately love it the way that he did. It took me years to appreciate, and Mark just badgering how great it is over years and years, that I really got into my head that it really is a great episode. But it's there's 12 episodes I personally prefer, and that is Duet from Deep Space Nine. And I don't have anything negative to say. I love this episode just like the other ones better, and that's all.
I think you scared.
I missed it. I lost my headphones. What did you say? What was it?
I said Duet.
Oh, Duet. Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I feared you were going to pick a different episode. My head went into a different direction with that one. I love Duet. I see what you're saying. What I love, and I'll pass this over to Mark in a second. What I really love about the episode is, coming from being a theater geek, it comes off similar to Frame of Mind. I think the episode's called for Next Generation, the one where we get inside Riker's mind. It comes off like it could have been presented, and I want to say Frame of Mind was actually done this way in one stage show in England once. I have to back up that point. Someone can tell me if I'm wrong, but I thought I read that somewhere. But this episode comes off very theater-like to me. Like it could just be a very play. It's very under budgeted compared to a lot of the episode. I think the relationship works. That actor that plays that Cardassian's in fucking everything, and he's just a great character actor. I think this has won a lot of awards on Deep Space Nine too. And I would say a similar thing and I think it deserves some of the awards that it does, but it's another one of those episodes that I feel like gets a little bit too much attention, similar to another episode that we're going to talk about that's higher on my list. But I think these one-off episodes of Deep Space Nine that are getting all this, getting some of the votes and stuff, I think are a little overrated on what makes Deep Space Nine great, which is the long-form story arcs. So it's kind of tough to judge Deep Space Nine on an individual episode basis. But I think this is a very great episode. This was number 5 on my list.
I don't think it gets too much attention. Don't think it gets enough. I think it's underrated if anything. So as Afkin well knows, this is my number 1. This is number 1 on my list. I've always I've always been very vocal. This has always just been number 1 since it first aired. I just fell in love with this episode. It touched me like no episode ever did. It's like very theatrical, like you said. The acting is amazing, and I am a fan. Like I mentioned this a billion times on my channel, but I'm a huge fan of acting. I love when there's 2 actors in a room playing off each other very well. I don't need fancy cinematography. I don't need special effects. I don't need action. You just have really engaging dialogue, and I think dialogue is underrated. I'm going to film school. Everyone's like, "Oh, you too much dialogue." I think if dialogue is done right, it can be absolutely more captivating than fancy cinematography.
That's what makes Pulp Fiction a great movie, and a lot of what Quentin. I know you guys might hate Quentin Tarantino, but like dialogue is what makes great movies.
No, I don't.
But like no, that's what and some people think. But I think what his early movies, what always makes great, even if his movies are overblown and some of the special effects go over the top, and I know he's great, I can always count on enjoying the dynamic of the dialogue. And as long as you always have that, something's interesting to me, because I think that's a direct relation to character development and understanding character perspectives. Yeah. And something can be boring, and that's with stage. If a lot of shit can be going on, but if it's 2 people talking and it's interesting on a stage, that's interesting to me, and that's what I love about this episode.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you about Quentin Tarantino. That's why I love his movies as well. And I think, and not just the great, but the whole way the story plays out from start to finish, it really makes you question the whole idea of prejudice, and how just the character arc Kira goes through is amazing. And I stand by, this is my number 1 favorite Star Trek episode from any series, but I do see what you're saying, Phil, about it being a bit standalone, which isn't the Deep Space Nine standard, because if there was one flaw I'd have to say about this episode, it's that they didn't continue the story arc after this. Kira went through a major character change. It seemed like in a 3rd season episode that wasn't nearly as good. They kind of repeated the same beat rather than just continuing it, which kind of annoyed me. But again, that is a very, very minor complaint. I think if you judge it as its own episode, I think it's just amazing.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with any of that. I love this episode, but I do want to say that more than Pulp Fiction, Reservoir Dogs to me was really. Pulp Fiction was kind of. That was his blockbuster. Like, I mean, Reservoir Dogs was more the low budget, kind of just could have easily been a stage play. It was.
I saw Pulp Fiction first, and I used to I was in a theater group, and we had the script, and we would act out scenes from it. It was important to my particular group of friends.
Yeah, and I like Pulp Fiction too, but I'm just saying, if I'm picking a Tarantino movie that really focuses on dialogue, I would go Reservoir Dogs, but Pulp Fiction is also in that category. But anyway, back to this episode. Yeah, it was great for the dialogue and the character, the change that Kira goes through and the realization that she comes to was really, really well done. I just don't have that personal connection that you do, so I just happen to like 12 episodes more. That's the only reason why. I think this is fun doing this kind of like getting the different opinions. I could totally accept that you just have a different opinion, different sort of background and view of this episode, and that's great. So I was put this episode at number 1, even though I knew it wouldn't make it because it's my number 1. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on. Phil, it's your turn to say number 8. I think we're up to. So we're really getting down to it.
Number 8. Okay, let me go to my list over here. Pushing on. Oh, this is tough. This is tough because I'm looking at it and I have my 25, but now like looking at it all as a whole, I'm like, okay, where am I going with this one? Because it's so tough to not just go to the honestly the TOS episodes, and because some of these Voyager episodes are just amazing. But I think I need to go with the Scorpion 2-part episode here. Scorpion, it's great. I love the introduction of 7 to 9. I'm sorry, I don't have my actual notes, as I mentioned to Mark earlier. My notes got the dog ate my notes. But Scorpion is the episode that 7 of 9 joins the cast. It's the Borg and the species 758692365758009. And I think this is a very good Voyager episode. I think, again, suffers from some elements of Janeway, pigheady, she's right, everyone else is wrong, when a lot of people are making other excellent points, and Janeway's like, no, if you go against me, it's treason. Blah, I'm Janeway. like whatever. There's some elements of that in this episode going on, but I like the unhealthy and the unhealthy relationship and balance of a relationship between the Borg and humans. I feel like it's a really great concept. But like a lot of Voyager episodes, I find myself wishing it was the Next Generation crew at times, or I would love to have seen Picard put in a situation. I know he was in the Borg episode or whatever, but that doesn't fucking count. I'm Geordi's friend. No, that doesn't fucking count. But I would have loved to see Picard put in a situation where he had to befriend the Borg for a greater good of some sort. But seeing Janeway in that situation, seeing Voyager in that situation was still very interesting. 7 of 9, Jerry Ryan does an excellent job in this episode. And in the back half episode, playing that Locutus part, essentially, on board of the ship and speaking for the Borg. I think it was a good moment of Voyager, and Voyager only got better from this point with a lot of stuff with her added to the cast. And I just think there's a lot of really great stuff happening in this episode.
Yeah, I will say it's number 8 on our collective list, and it's number 8 on my list. So it works out pretty perfectly for me. So yeah, I mean, I love this episode not just for the Borg stuff, and also the fact that because when I first learned they were introducing a new Borg character in the second part, I thought, oh, that's going to be hokey. It's going to not mesh with the first part. But when you watch them both together back to back, it actually totally does. And it's not. You could tell they were trying to play up 7 of 9, but to me, they did a good job at it. They didn't do it too much where it came off as like a sort of device. It actually melded into the plot perfectly. But what I love most about this episode is the Chakotay-Janeway relationship. I mean, he talked about a bit before about how Janeway's being, I'm the captain, but I didn't think she actually went too far here. There was the other 2-part of Equinox where I think she totally went off the rails, and I just wanted to smack her around. But this one actually played out really well, like with her and Chakotay. And I think personally, it was like the best sort of captain first officer conflict I think was done in Star Trek. So that's mainly what I like about this episode.
Yeah, and I actually wanted to echo those sentiments. That's my favorite part of this episode. This was number 7 on my list, so I'm just one off. I'm very close to it. So, but absolutely, and you actually talked about this in your review for the Enterprise episode, Damage, the dialogue between Archer and T'Pol in that episode, and I feel the same way about the dialogue between Chakotay and Janeway in this episode. I think the best part is the Scorpion speech there. And Janeway was ultimately like, yeah, I'm the captain, but she did hear Chakotay out. She didn't just go, well, I have a story to tell you about the Scorpion. Shut up, I'm the captain, go away. I mean, she listened to him. And it was, I thought, a very good exchange. And I think what really makes the episode for me is that exchange.
Yeah, and the way they resolved the situation was by Janeway realizing that she needed to listen to Chakotay and work with him and not against him. And I love
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Sorry, I have to jump in the chat for 1 second. Missed opportunity for corporate sponsors. Number 1 being Chipotle for Chakotay. Good one, I.
That's all right.
Unfortunately, Chipotle didn't exist, I don't think, back then, or at least it wasn't a national chain.
Yeah. Cool. All right, so let us go ahead and move on to number 7. Again, all good episodes. I guess I'm up next. And it was number 12 on my list, but I don't begrudging getting it this high. I actually kind of expected it to, and I don't think it's a travesty or anything. I think this is definitely a great episode. But it's hard for me because I've seen this episode so many times, like ridiculous amount of times, that it's hard for me I have to sort of put myself outside of the fact of being sick of this episode when trying to judge it. Otherwise, it probably wouldn't have even ranked as high for me. But that is Mirror Mirror. which is it's a classic. It's the parallel universe standard, like the whole goatee thing. That's to become, it's interwoven in the culture. People who don't even know Star Trek and know where it's from, they're how you have a goatee, you're the evil version of yourself, like they did that on South Park. And it's just and it's a good solid episode. Maybe like the stuff with Kirk wooing the woman is a bit cheesy, as it tends to be in the original series, but that's the original series. You got to give it a pass for that. But it was an interesting look at them coping in this sort of, and also showing that the Federation could be evil. And I also will say I also saw this as a stage play in the park last summer as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they do the summer Star Trek thing.
They're doing that where you live now too?
Yeah, they're doing that where I remember you told me first about
because where I live, they had a Star Trek in the park, but they only did it for 5 years, and I only caught the last 3. And the first one I saw was Mirror Mirror. And the last one they did was Trouble with Tribbles, which was actually amazing to see it on a stage because like people had all handmade the Tribbles. They asked people to handmade Tribbles a year ahead of time. But yeah, I saw it too on a stage, and it played out great. But for me, I had this as number 4, and I will admit 98% nostalgia, because this episode when I was a kid blew me away. I'd never heard of parallel universes before, and I am still a huge fan of parallel universe stories when they're done well, which most times they are. But I'm a big fan of parallel universe stories, and this is the reason why. And I've always loved this episode. I always loved the ending, how Spock, Kirk was able to plant a little seed of doubt in Mirror Universe Spock's head, and so just a classic to me. Number 4. What are we at on our collective list? Number 7.
Number 7.
Yeah, it's not bad. It's not bad.
So yeah, I agree. I love this episode. I think this was number, I think it was 6 or it was 6 on my list or something like that. And I really love this episode. I talked a lot earlier when we were mentioning Tribbles about those things that are just synonymous with Star Trek. Mark mentioned this a second ago too. This is another one of those things that just carries through. I was way also, as Akton was saying, I was into kind of parallel universe with the concept of Bizarro Superman, who is on Super Friends and stuff like that. So this just kind of backed it up, and it kind of was just another element of that. I think it's done really well, even with just the subtle little changes. At the time, it could be looked at a cliche as a cliche for a reason, and this kind of started that with just the subtle changes on a show of this is the Bizarro Land, and it has made it into South Park, as you mentioned. A lot of other places have done parodies of this concept, and then obviously this started the point where almost every one of the series did it, Deep Space Nine did it, Enterprise did it. Next Generation did not.
Voyager did not. Voyager did not. That is why I'm saying Living Witness.
How did Next Generation not do it? Imagine how fucking cool a Next Generation Mirror episode might have been. We got so many of those stupid holodeck episodes. We could have got one evil. I mean, I know we got lore, which some could say, "Oh, you got lore. That's evil data." But I mean, real evil data, and the evil.
There was a novel. I read a Star Trek Next Generation novel that was set in the Mirror Universe. It was my favorite novel of Star Trek in the time. It was in the 90s. But they did do a novel, but never an episode.
I'll definitely have to check that out, because I've been getting more into at least listening to audio versions of of them. I just listened to Anzadi 2 or something like that, which the voice who does it is Gowron, the actor Gowron does it. And it's actually really cool hearing him do some of the voices of the other characters. If people haven't checked out the audio books of some of the extension universe stuff, it's really cool. Usually it's one of the actors from Star Trek, usually the centerpiece of the story. There's a Quark story that has him reading it. There's Odo ones with him reading it. Leonard Nimoy reads a bunch of them. So if people haven't checked those out, I can't recommend them enough. If you're into audiobooks at all, they're amazing. Simon and Schuster stuff. They're a lot out there. But yeah, next Mirror Mirror, excellent episode. One of the most classic Trek episodes. And you mentioned this earlier, Akton. I like how this connects directly to the Deep Space Nine. I know Deep Space Nine got kind of cheesy with it, with the one at the end with the Ferengis going back and stuff. Yeah. But I think Deep Space Nine handled the Mirror Universe stuff. It was great to see that come back. And I always liked Mirror Universe Kira. So
Yeah, well, I like how Deep Space Nine didn't do just a one-for-one evil. Like it was just a bit more dynamic than that. But anyway, getting sidetracked. Oh, I did want to mention that I think the reason Next Generation never did it is because they were trying too hard at this stage to separate from the original series, because they were known too much. Like they did a repeat of Naked Now as their Naked Time as their second episode, which sucked. So I think after that they shied away from it and tried to stand on its own 2 feet.
You're right, and if they did do it, it probably would have been a season 1 or 2 episode, and it would have been horrible.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I think we're over to you.
Oh, I'm sorry. And I guess they kind of did do it in that Parallels episode where we see all the different crews of the Enterprise and the multiple dimensions all paralleling each other. So we see that evil. We see sort of the Riker and the alternate universe. You could view that as some weird way of they kind of did it.
It was a parallel universe episode without doing the mirror universe, which is great. I think you don't have to.
Another great episode of Next Generation.
Yeah, absolutely. That was actually in the IMDb's top 10, and I wish it would have made it to the top 5. But anyway,
that would have been high on my list. That's one of my favorite Worf episodes.
All right, guys, let's go on. I
will say that all the episodes left are in my top 10, so I'm happy. So I'm not going to be sad with any of these.
Yeah, so me too.
Number 6.
So number 6. This is number 9 on my list, and I just rewatched this for the first time in many, many years. I hadn't seen it in a long, long time. Then I went and watched Mark's review on this, and then I watched it again because this is a very powerful episode, and that is The Visitor from Deep Space Nine. The episode with where Jake, is growing older, and Cisco is trapped in that subspace, whatever the hell that thing was, and then Cisco is chained to him. I loved how this episode played out, except I was waiting for Worf to say, "Kern, when did you become a human?" Because it's the same actor.
Candyman.
Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot about Candyman. But yeah, I love this episode. And talk about crying, right? Kind of very, I teared up just a tiny bit at the end, so just a little bit.
Yeah, this is funny you say it was number 9 on your list. It was also number 9 on my list. I do think this is a great episode. I would put a couple of Deep Space Nine episodes higher, like one you already mentioned, but I do. It's definitely up there. It's definitely top 10 material for me, and it was just very touching. Like it's the by and large, but by not even close. It's the best Jake episode that Deep Space Nine has ever done.
Oh yeah.
It's because he's not in most of it as himself. He's
played by a better actor.
He's played by the Candyman, so it ends up working out. This episode for me was number 7 on my list. I mean, this is just, what can you say about this episode? This was, I want to say this episode again was one of those ones that won the 1996 Hugo Award for Best Dramatic Presentation. It was the best Jake episode. It was a really intense episode of following the father-son relationship, and especially in the sense of Jake didn't really have too much to do it many times, and it gave him a big moment. And I think Deep Space Nine is huge on that, where everybody has a huge moment episode. Even Morn has an episode. If you're there, we're gonna give you an episode. You're here. You can play it too. It's like giving Ringo a song on a Beatles album. You get an episode, and you get an episode, and you get an episode. And I think this is Jake's episode, and it really pays off for some excellent acting. I believe the guy's name is Tony Todd or something like that.
Yes, that's correct. Tony Todd.
Worf's brother. Isn't he also shows up in maybe one of the Next Generation the movies or something? He's been in a lot of Star Trek stuff. Or no, he's in a I'd have to look it up. He's been in Star Trek a lot.
He's been a lot.
He's been in a lot. And this episode just is very self-contained, but also feeds into a long-term storyline. I think for a standalone episode, it does a good job connecting to the overall arc of Deep Space Nine. And only one difference is when Jake at the end of the episode warps into wherever Cisco is. It looks a lot like the Prophet place. I don't know. And then it's a very sad.
That's true.
It's very. And it's very sad if you think of this whole episode and everything that happens of it. If you think about the conclusion of Deep Space Nine, when you see Jake alone at the end of the final episode when Sisko leaves again, it's not the same thing, but Jake has to go through the rest of his however long Sisko is with the Prophets, and he'll never truly have his father. And Deep Space Nine in a lot of ways does end in a happy, but it's so bittersweet in a lot of ways. And watching this again, this was one of the 2 episodes I did not watch again because I didn't feel like crying, but I've seen this episode so many times, and I love it so much. Great episode.
Yeah, and the music has to be mentioned. The music in this episode was just great. Like I had the soundtrack of it. They released it, and it was just Just one little nitpick I have about this episode though is that in this possible future it showed the Klingons being in charge because they were trying to play off with this 4th season storyline of the Klingons being the enemy now, which of course they just in the next season they're like, oh, let's pretend that never happened, because they realize that's a mistake. The Klingons at this stage play better as an ally, as a sort of rough, uneasy ally, but as an ally rather than a right-out enemy. But I mean, that's a product of its time. Yeah. It came right after that.
Yeah. It's a shame. Yeah, it's a shame this episode wasn't made during the Dominion era.
Yeah. All right, cool. So Phil, let's move on to number 5.
Number 5. Okay, let me get into this. I'm doing some cutting and pasting here, so I got a little bit of a mess here. So okay. So number 5 on my list. It's tough, but here we go. The last one. It's City on the Edge of Forever. Classic time travel, started the whole time travel thing. Love this fucking episode. Some of the best Kirk and Spock you're ever going to get, their relationship. Really understand the plight of McCoy through the whole thing. And this was one of the episodes that cemented my love for Bones McCoy, DeForest Kelly's Bones McCoy being my favorite, probably in my top 5 favorite Star Trek characters of all time. And the dynamic between Kirk and Spock in this episode is just really well done. There's a lot of cheesy elements in this show, but it's part of what makes the original series the original series. And I don't know, I love this episode. Had a great time watching it again, and I forgot how emotionally invested I got in Bones' story. But just the best, my favorite, or at least on that list, my favorite TOS episode.
Yeah, this is number 3 on my list.
Oh no, not my favorite. My favorite, except for the Romulan one that we already got. So. Balance of Terror. Sorry, my second favorite.
This was my favorite original series episode, and I just did a top 10 countdown where it was like 20th century themed episodes, and it was number 1. I mentioned that video, how people who watch my top 10 videos probably sick of City on the Edge of Forever being number 1. Because it's number 1 a lot, because it's a great episode. Like, to me, it's a classic. It's like it holds the test of time. All original series episodes have a level of cheesiness that you have to look past. If you look past it, it's like the structure of it was just amazing, and it was so tragic. Like, talk about an episode that makes you cry. Like, you feel like William Shatner is usually like the over-the-top ham actor, but in this episode where he's just like, I think the director might probably stepped in a lot. I'm not sure. But at the end point when he says, let's get the hell out of here, like, he didn't overplay that. He did it perfectly. Just the amount of agony and pain in his voice.
And when he grabs Bones in that moment, it's just so like, I lost it. Yeah, it's really emotional.
Yeah. And this was also number 3 on my list as well. And also my favorite all-time original series episode. What else is there to say about it? And again, I always think back with these original series episodes, like how I viewed it as a kid and how that carried over to when I was adult. When I viewed it as a kid, it was like this. I was just entranced watching this Guardian of Forever. Now history has changed. And we're like, wait, what? I was just captivated immediately. And to this day, even though I now see it more in the lens of, that's some styrofoam thing that they but at the same time, it's still equally as powerful. And the ending is just tragic and just amazing. And best original series episode of all time. Number 3 on my list.
Yeah, and then one thing, just a quick shout out, is because Phil mentioned the audiobooks earlier, is that there's an audiobook for Xindi where they read the line of this. It was about the Guardian Forever, and they read the line of Kirk saying, "Let's get the hell out of here." But Jonathan Frakes read it, and he read it like, "Let's get the hell out of here."
Yes, and this is something, Mark, I don't remember, you and I used to quote that all the time. We used to joke about that.
Yeah,
let's get the hell out of here.
When I'm like, time for me to get to work, I'll say to myself, "Let's get the hell out of here."
I love audiobook pronunciations. It's I still, every time I say Peter Baelish's name, I go Petire Baelish.
Petire Baelish. Not as bad as Millicent. Like, what the hell? It's like Melisandre. The Millicent. Like, what are you talking? Okay, and let's not get too sidetracked.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm the segue king. Sorry.
Okay, so we've reached the top 4, which means we each have 1 turn left. So I'm going to do the random number generator from now on. Because
don't we each wait? Wouldn't that be in the top?
We each have 1 turn left. No, because whoever picks number 2 also picks number 1.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I see.
All right.
So we each have 1 turn left. Let me.
Someone in the chat says. Someone in the chat while you're setting this up, Joe says, "I love Nor the Battle Too Strong for another great Jake episode." Yeah, that is another good Jake episode.
I actually didn't like that, but I get sound sidetracked here. There just went too much into the Klingon storyline, which annoyed me. But anyway, so let me just recap our top 10.
Okay. I'm going to run to the boys' room. I will be right back.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, so our top 10 so far is Measure of the Man, number 10, Duet, number 9, Scorpion, number 8, Mirror, Mirror, number 7, The Visitor, number 6, City on the Edge of Forever, number 5, which means the 4 episodes that we have left are, hold on, let me say this in order that's not from my thing. So the 4 episodes we have left are Yesterday's Enterprise, The Inner Light, In the Pale Moonlight, and Year of Hell. And
all great. What were you gonna say?
I'm surprised these were our top 4.
Really? I think they're all great episodes. I think they're
all in my top 6, so I think they're great. But I'm surprised that you guys agreed.
Well, actually, I have one that's number 8 on my list, but I don't begrudge it for being in the top 4 at all.
Yeah, it's in your top 10 still.
Yeah.
Excuse me. So what are our top? I'm looking at our top 4 right now. Okay, I'm happy with this top 4.
Yeah, I am too.
Yeah, and
it was a lot to get here, but I think we got something with this top 4.
Alrighty, cool. So let me hold on. I don't want to do that. Okay, there we go.
Oh, I'm looking at the chat. The chat is going awesome right now. Someone's saying The Inner Light is overrated. I'm surprised Year of Hell is still there.
All right. Okay, so let's again. Atkins number 1, Phil, you number 2, I'm number 3, and here we go. See who goes first.
That means I get to pick number 1.
No, that's just the number assigned to us.
Okay.
Yeah. So Phil, you're actually next. You get to say number 4.
Oh, number 4. Okay. Okay, number 4. Fuck, I love this episode. Going back and watching it, I wish the original thought for this I could have done with 2 seasons of this going on in this show. I love when someone calls all the people from Voyager or the whole cast of Voyager a bunch of dumbasses. That's right. I'm going with Year of Hell. Year of Hell is awesome. We got Red Foreman in one of, I think his best acting performances of all time. And I think part of what makes this episode so great and in the top 4 episodes of all time, something when I was looking into doing this list, I didn't think a Voyager episode would push as high in my list as it did. I think this was number 8 or something on my list. I didn't think a Voyager episode would pop the top 10 for me, considering my what I thought vehement hate for a lot of Voyager, but this episode, I watched this episode twice. These 2 episodes twice. I love this. This is awesome. I could have dealt with, and then I watched a couple of reviews of this where someone said their original thought was doing this for a whole season, like a year of hell, like literally a year of hell. I'm like, that would have been so amazing. I just love seeing Voyager at its worst against an overpowered enemy like this. And I even love the Chakotay and Tom arc, and this is the first time I've even mentioned Tom on this fucking whole entire show. And I love the whole arc with them when they go over to Foreman's ship. And
were you just waiting for him to call Chakotay a dumbass? Because I was.
Yeah, and he called Harris a dumbass for trying to mess with temporal weapons. And I just love the concept, and I feel so emotionally connected to that character, in the sense of at the beginning of it all, when he's like 98% renewed the whole thing, and then he can never get back to that. Oh, and you can just relate. Again, that's just something you can relate to. Perfection is never attainable. And you're especially in something like this, you're playing with these crazy forces, and the anomaly that Voyager caused in it all. I think everything worked out perfect for what I believe is the best Voyager episode, and definitely deserved to be in this top 5 and as high as it is on our list.
Yes, and I agree. This is the best Voyager episode. I had this at number 5 on my list, so right in the same area. Yeah, and I know Mark would probably going to bring this up too, but because I know you talked about this in your review, that Ronald D. Moore is quoted as saying that this is what the entire series should have been like, and I kind of agree, because I found Voyager to be disappointing. I always thought Voyager failed at its mission to do something different than the rest of the Trek universe. I thought it got very stale. If it had been they would have had to tone it down a little bit. They couldn't have it be quite as dramatic as far as all of the things that are going wrong if they're going to stretch it out for an entire series. But and Ronald D. Moore did kind of do that when he did BSG, and I love BSG, so that's probably why I love these episodes. Like I wish that I do agree that Voyager would have been a better series if the entire series had been kind of in this tone. But more than just that, there's also Phil mentioned Red Foreman and the aliens and his dilemma and trying to perfect things. That was also an underrated part of this episode. I'm glad you brought that up, because that also was really cool.
Yeah, he's a really great actor, Kurtwood Smith. I never watched that 70s show, so I think of him more as
it's all right. It's all right.
I think of him more as the bad guy from RoboCop. So I was like, hey, it's the RoboCop guy. But he was a great actor. He was also in this Deep Space Nine episode Past Tense, which he was also good in. And but this is the one I think he really sort of shined through. I'm actually surprised it made it this high, because I know a lot of people don't like this episode as much as I do. I totally agree with both of you. This is the best Voyager episode. It was my favorite. I know a lot of people complain as it kind of doesn't matter because they hit the reset button at the end. I'm like, well, so what? It's still a great episode. And the way they hit the reset button, I'm sorry, but it's a cheesy one-liner, but it's a great Janeway got a cheesy one-liner. I can't even remember what it said. I think she said time's up or something, and then she crashed the ship.
Yeah.
Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Time is up. Get to the chopper. Get to the chopper now.
Yeah, she did say time's up. That's right. Yeah. So and it was just such a great episode. Such a great.
The whole quote is, if that ship is destroyed, all history might be restored, and this is 1 year I'd like to forget. Time's up. That's her whole quote.
That's it. Yeah.
Although she did. I think it was 2 separate sentences, but that was awesome. But Oh, I lost my train of thought. Go ahead.
Yeah, and isn't it kind of ironic that all that the Red Foreman guy ever had to do was just destroy his ship, and he would have solved this problem?
Yeah.
If he had just self-destructed his ship, he would have just solved everything, but he didn't. He never thought of that.
Well, I think he might have been too afraid it wouldn't work. But
yeah. Wow, it's interesting. And I never thought about this. If we think about the Visitor and what Jake ultimately has to do to solve his problem, it's kind of similar. Just destroy the ship, solve the problem, cut the string, and start everything back from scratch and stuff like that. I think what again, we've talked around this a couple times. You guys both mentioned, I mentioned it at the beginning. I think what makes it a great episode and what makes a lot of Star Trek episodes not great episodes, when we have these one-off villains and stuff, when they're not, that when you can't relate to them, you can't emotionally connect to them. And I think what makes this such a great episode isn't just everything that's going on with Voyager, which I agree with everything you guys said about. This should have been a lot more dynamic of Voyager. They're out nowhere in the fucking wilderness with a ship that should have been destroyed in the whole trip and just been like this for a couple of seasons or something. But you really care about the villain, so to speak, and know he's like a multi-layered character. He's not just evil or something. You can relate to him, and that makes you care.
Yeah, and I also have to say that moment where Janeway saying goodbye to Tuvok, who is blind at this point, where she knows that she's going to sacrifice herself. That was a touching moment. Like, that brought a tear to my eye. Had great music. And also I wanted to mention that the reason it was considered doing it for the entire fourth season, but the reason why they didn't is because they came up with the 7 of 9 idea in the Borg storyline, which was good too. So I can't really begrudge them for going with that, but I still kind of wish they would have went this way.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So let me bring up the screen. So we're just down to me and Apkin. You can be Apkin number 1. I'll be number 2. Screensaver and go. Okay, so here we are.
Ooh.
All right, Apkin, you get to choose number 3.
Oh, so you get to choose number 1. Didn't you get to choose number 1 on our time travel one too?
Hey, it's all random.
Sure it is, Mark. This is all very suspicious.
Don't look at the man behind the curtain.
But you know what? It's your video. You can get to choose number 1. Okay, so I get to pick number 3. I will pick the one that's lowest ranked on my list, but this is actually a tough one because these are all 3 great episodes. But I am going to go with The Inner Light. No, it's not. It wasn't in the Pale Moonlight. That's what you thought. I actually have that one ranked higher than The Inner Light. Yeah, and actually, I haven't rewatched this yet. I am actually in the midst of doing my episode by episode review of season 5, and it's like one of the last episodes of season 5. And I'm watching the season 5 episode. The middle of season 5 is terrible. Yes. But anyway, so I can't wait to, and that's where I am right now. So I can't wait to get to this episode in the course of doing my season 5 review, because it's really one of the great episodes. I mean, because it takes such a huge risk of just departing from the regular Enterprise story, and Picard's really the only. I mean, we see the other characters, but Picard's really the only one who has a role to play in this episode. It was very risky, but they just pulled it off so beautifully. And I can't actually, because I haven't rewatched this recently, I can't speak to as many specifics, and I'm sure you guys will, and I'll jump on the bandwagon with those. But I just remember that just a really beautiful, amazingly done episode.
Yeah, I'm gonna just say a couple things because I'm in a similar position where I talked about that. There were 2 episodes I did not watch because I did not want to lose my shit, because they're episodes I always lose my shit on. One was The Visitor, the other one was this episode. This episode kills me. I don't know why, it just kills me. That look he gives at the end. I think this was one of those episodes. There's a few in Next Generation that are really dependent. A couple work, couple don't. A couple are in Ryza that don't work, but that are so dependent on Patrick Stewart performance alone to carry the episode. Family's another one, or I guess his brother carries a lot of that too. But this episode is such a risk. Akton's right. Such a risk that they took to depend so much on Patrick Stewart. And Patrick Stewart just hits a fucking home run in this episode. Every emotion he conveys, and the greatness of him as a fucking actor at the end of this episode, with just that subtle look about, similar to the look that he gives at the end of All Good Things, where you just know things aren't all right. And you just see the emotional taxing of everything that he's been through. But I think everything's done really well, similar to other stories that you've seen in the future past this point, where someone's in a dream, but they're ignoring that they're in a dream for so long. And I like him feuding it for so long until he finally gave into it. And I love the rage he shows when he gets out of it because of how much. And then it's one of those episodes I ask myself all those questions too, putting yourself in that position, how that would feel for yourself to come out of that. And it's just incredibly done. Not the best Next Generation episode. I think there are episodes that weren't mentioned on this list that I might like even a little bit more than this, but I really love this episode, and I like how it connects to a future episode too, even though it's one that's not one of my favorite ones, both him playing and jamming with the his future wife. His whatever that girl's name is. I forget the name of that episode.
Yeah. Well, actually, before Mark talks, just real quick, I just want to agree with that. This is not my favorite Next Generation episode, and there are some not on this list I would have ranked above it, but it's still a fantastic episode, and just
still fantastic.
I'm not upset about it being number 3. So go on.
It's top 5 Next Generation for me, so I think it's one of the best Next Generation episodes. Definitely. I mean, it's funny because I can probably remember when I first saw this episode as a teenager, I didn't like it because I watched it halfway. I started it at 20 minutes through. I didn't really understand what was going wrong. I kind of just dismissed it as another I thought I got it confused with all the boring episodes in the 5th season in the middle, and I kind of didn't give it a chance. But once I heard so much good things about it, I actually sat down, watched it from start to finish, blown away by it. I've shown this episode to several people now who've never seen anything Star Trek, and I was like, here, watch this. And I'm like, holy shit, Star Trek is awesome. I want to see more. This is such a good, powerful, dramatic episode. And it seems like kind of a boring concept, but just the weight that they give to it, and I never ceased to cry, shed some tears at that ending scene where Picard's playing that flute. That was just so good.
Just talking about it makes me cry. And I just to back up one of your points. It is one of those episodes you can show people that have never seen Star Trek before, and they can appreciate it. Similar to one of the other ones that's on our list here that we're yet to talk about.
Yeah. I just want to say, talking about the flute song, Cardinal Doomsday said in the chat, now where can I find his flute song as a ringtone?
That's pretty good, a ringtone. If you haven't. On this, they released the soundtrack, which actually wasn't in the episode, but they did an extended orchestral version of the flute song that's also so beautiful. I listened to that a lot.
Yeah,
that's a really good thing to check out.
Captain Fraser Crane, Kelsey Graham.
Yeah, yeah, and you can make any MP3 into a ringtone. If you get it as MP3, you can make it into a ringtone.
Cool. All right, so let's end this once for all. Now, I'll start with the number 2, and let's just talk about number 2 before we get to number 1, even though we'll know what number 1 is once I name number 2, but let's pretend we don't know and then stick with 2 until I name it. So give number 2 its due because it's number 2. So, and I think it deserves to be number 2, and that is Yesterday's Enterprise. Absolutely love this episode to death. This is one, to me, with Best of Both Worlds, that's an episode I loved as a teenager, and I kind of fell off of it. I never fell off of this episode. I still love it regardless of how many times I watch it. It's just amazing. It's touching. It's good seeing, it's another sort of parallel universe type thing like Mirror Mirror, but it's different because it's an alternate timeline. And then having the whole thing, again, it doesn't matter if there's a reset button, because the way they do the reset button with Picard saying that will be the day when the Klingons ask surrender, it was so awesome, and he goes up into flames and the ship around it. Oh, it's just such a good episode.
So cool.
Yeah, and this was my number 1. I knew once it got down to this and Pale Moonlight with the 2 of you guys, I had no shot. Unless if I had been the one choosing, it would have been reverse. But because this is my number 1, greatest Next Generation episode ever. Actually, I have Best of Both Worlds kind of up there with it. They're both very close to me, but I went with this because, as I mentioned earlier, I knew the Best of Both Worlds would never be number 1, and I thought this one at least had a chance. Number 2 is very, very good place for it. Another thing that I said in my review of season 3 is that this has a very good, single episode contained, love story, because those are very, very difficult to pull off. Most of the time when they try to do a single episode, love story, you end up with Counselor Troy and some dumbass or whatever, or Riker and, some woman that you don't really know as a character. But this just worked so well because these are two characters who really have nothing to lose. They're just in the lowest possible place that they can be, and one of them knows that she's supposed to be dead. The other one, his captain, is dead, and he knows he's about to have to commit suicide. And it just worked so well. There's so many aspects of this episode, so many different angles you could look at it and talk about how great it is.
They also underplayed it, which was really good. The romance wasn't so much in forefront; it was more in the back half of the episode. It wasn't immediate, and she just couldn't help it. She was such a Happy Gilmore fan; she wanted to get Shooter McGavin's autograph. She's like, I knew it was. Yeah, I knew it was just a matter of time before one of us did. I have to get, but I really love this episode 2. I thought about putting this episode number 1, but it's so good. The lighting in it too, the way that they shift the light from the original Enterprise D with the hotel, the hotel and flying hotel ship, to shift it into the battleship kind of thing with the spotlight on the bridge with all of them. I think one of Whoopi Goldberg's best, and this is one of those just underrated elements of it, Whoopi Goldberg, who's an excellent actress, and it gets forgotten about through history how great of an actress she is. And when she's good on the show, she's really good. And her first scene, starting the scene with Worf, where she's feeding him prune juice and shit, and just seeing it all framed from her perspective through it all is really good. As bad as I think she is in Q Who, for instance, I fucking hate her in Q Who, where she's trying to, what are you going to block Q's powers? What the fuck are you doing? What are you doing? I'm sorry, I didn't say this at the time. I forgot this. What the fuck is Guinan trying to do? As much as Guinan works in this episode, she doesn't work in that episode. But you're blocking his powers. That's gonna block Q's omnipotence. You fucking whatever. But
let's not get up on a tangent here. But yeah, she's
just excellent. She sells this episode, and it was a great send off for Tasha, who having just heard many interviews and actually having an opportunity to talk to her too, she just didn't like how her character went out and regretted the decision to write her character out. It's really a real amazing way to go out as Tasha Yar, and just everything worked in this episode. Everything worked. Yeah.
Well, you already touched on this, Phil, but I did want to say Vincent Adultman in the chat said Akton Captain Shooter McGavin. it was a bit weird seeing him in Happy Gilmore after seeing him. He says, hey, why aren't you off kissing Tasha Yar? Stop being a dick to Adam Sandler. But yeah,
actually, that actor, I can't remember what else he was in, but he was always like the villain in silly movies like that. He was always so by the time I saw Yesterday's Enterprise, I'd always already seen him as a villain in all these other movies. So it was weird.
I'm with you on that one. I always he almost took me out of it for a second, seeing him in as Yesterday's Enterprise, and I'm IMDBing him, but
I think he was good in that role, though. I think he was.
He was awesome. He was awesome in it.
Okay, all right. So let's get to the number 1 episode now. Do you want to say it with me now, Phil?
Yeah, let's do it. Number 1 is
1, 2, 3. It's a freak!
It's a freak! It's a freak! It's a freak!
I think they're like memes online of him holding a rake going, it's a rake! It's a rake!
It's a rake!
It's funny, rewatching that episode again, I realized kind of out of nowhere it seems that he starts talking like that all of a sudden. Like, it's a fake! Like, he doesn't talk like that.
Come on, director. Could you give me another read on that, please? And we're working on like the best episode of all time. Could you make one other read on that? And I know Mark kind of likes it.
We talked about this in our 2-hour-long.
Yeah, I think the whole first hour is us talking about that.
What about this episode? But yeah, I totally disagree with you. I love that line. I think it's perfect. I'm so glad.
Oh, no. I'm not saying I don't love the line.
It's class. He's talking to me. Yeah, I think it's classic, but I think it's a little cheesy. But Mark, continue. Sorry.
Yeah, I think like I mentioned this in our podcast discussion, to me, this was the Ned Stark losing his head moment of this series. I was like, I was just totally blown away when this happened because, Captain Sisko set up this plan. You think, oh, he's the hero of the show. Of course, the plan's going to work. When he comes there and he's just like, it's a fake, and it blows up in his face. I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? No way is this happening. And this is like the first time I think Deep Space Nine really went in a weird direction. And this is the best Garak episode, hands down. Like, Garak is my favorite character of Deep Space Nine.
And to piggyback on what you said, but ultimately by the end you figure out that it wasn't Sisko's plan that came to fruition. It was Garak's plan that came to fruition from the very fucking beginning. And the more I watch this episode, and we talked about this too at nauseum, the more I think once Sisko came to him, Garak had everything lining out. Whether it's Garak's best episode, I think it's the best episode Garak's a part of. I think Garak in the episode, I mentioned them before, like Improbable Cause, and like when he's doing the bomb, when he's undoing the bomb, when he's talking to himself and shit like that. Like I think pretty much everything he's amazing in, but I think this is the best episode he's a part of, obviously, because it's #1 on my list as well.
I mean, for me, I would say Improbable Cause has a lot. It has the most good Garak quotes. It has the best quotable Garaks. But
and was it by Inferno's Light and Purgatory's Shadow, like all those kind of Garak
I
moments.
think In the Pale Moonlight, for my money, is the best Garak episode.
Yeah, and I want to say that one of the criticisms that I've heard that is, Avery Brooks is a little over top with his overacting, but I love his overacting in this episode.
So well here.
His overacting is
It all
great.
just blew up in my face.
This episode would not be the same without his overacting. It was great. I mean, it almost kind of makes the episode for me. So I totally disagree with people who complain about this aspect of the episode. I love it. I think it works great for this episode.
Yeah. I can't say enough great things about this episode. If anyone's curious, Mark and I did I think it's about like a 2-hour conversation just on this episode. I used to be able to share videos, but I'll send Mark the link and maybe he can put it in the description of the video so you guys can.
I have the link. I already put it up on my announcement video. So
awesome, perfect. So if anyone wants to check that out, check out Mark's announcement video on that. But so I think this is just the perfect episode in a lot of ways. Everything comes together. It shows the lengths that Sisko will go, and I love how Starfleet pretty much backs up the whole plan and follows it through the whole way. But really, again, Garak steals the show in this episode. Sisko does run things, and I don't think anybody but Avery Brooks could really carry the episode the way he does, because it's so, we talked a few times about this, it's so theater, the way he's just monologuing to the audience, and all his mannerisms and all his everything. And when you see Avery Brooks outside of the Sisko part, you realize how much he's actually laying back for Sisko. It makes you view Sisko in a whole different way. Go listen to some interviews with Avery Brooks if you want to see how much acting Avery Brooks is actually doing with Sisko. He's holding back a lot. And there's a few moments here and there where they tell him to just go be fucking crazy as fuck, and there are moments there people are dying every day. It works so well, and just Garak's whole plan, subtle moment, but one of the best moments. Garak talking to Worf in this episode, considering the moments that happened a few episodes before with Garak and Worf together, where with Garak's whole, I want to join Starfleet with all that sort of shit. It's all connected, and it's the best, I think, as well, standalone episode. I have many friends, some of which are hardcore other franchise kind of fans that go, oh, Star Trek's boring, Star Trek's this, Star Trek's not deep, it's not dark, it's nothing, it's this. What I go, give me 45 minutes, give me fucking, or however long they have, 50 minutes, and I sit them down and I play them this episode out of context. Everything makes sense in the episode for the most part. Once they get over the who's this, who's the Dominion, who the Rum, you explain a couple key points to anybody, people can watch it. This is such a standalone episode for Star Trek, and my favorite Star Trek episode.
And I'll also say this is what you get when you have Ronald D. Moore be one of the head writers, one of the showrunners. Like, this is the kind of, like, we talked a bit before in some of my other videos about how he tried to join Voyager but quit in outrage because they wouldn't go in dark, risky directions. They would play it safe too much. And this is what happens when you let him do his thing. You get episodes like this where you take the hero of the show and make him do dark and despicable things and like it at the end of it.
And have to bribe Quark. Vincent said it in the chat. I have to bring it up. The scene with Quark too, with Cisco and Quark, is just genius.
Oh yes, absolutely. Like Quark was just in seventh heaven. It's like, are you bribing me? Oh.
Yeah, that was pretty awesome too. And
but let me see. I will say this. This was number 2 on my list behind Duet. So yeah, this number 1 is a good place for it.
Yeah, and Vincent also said in the chat a little while back that he said, because I can live with it. I can live with it. Computer, delete that entire log. That was such a
and great... then just with that, there was one more line in there that slips in, I can live with it. And I think that is such and that shows, again, Avery, we're talking a lot about acting tonight. That shows a lot of Avery Brooks' strength as an actor. Yes, he's like 1,000, and I'd love to see him on stage playing Shakespeare because he just like can let out that emotion, bam, 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 bam. But then he can really bring it down or give this like off take on it. In acting terms, a different color take on it, where it's just he adds a little pink or yellow colors to the line right there, and it's just like, whoa! It brings it to another level. I can live with it. And then there's a body motion where he crosses his leg over himself and he like curves in. And if you know like the body language thing where he's like, computer, delete the whole fucking program. Like he doesn't say fuck, but he might as well say, erase that bullshit now. It's such a human moment. And I think again, Deep Space Nine, and I think the original series, it's tough for me not to cloud my love for the original series with what I know from their characters in the movies, which became more rounded versions of themselves in some ways. So I think the next generation, I think Deep Space Nine and the original cast with the in the way that Kirk, Spock, and McCoy interact with each other does this the best on Star Trek, just being so human and showing you just relationship stuff and character depth on a very high level.
Yeah, and we haven't even talked about Senator Vreenak yet, which is for me absolutely. I love that it's a fake. I love everything about that guy's performance. And I mentioned this in our chat before. I saw him like on an episode of Seinfeld, and I was like, "What is so weird seeing him on Seinfeld?" But I thought,
do you remember what episode? Do you remember what episode it was?
Yeah, it was the one where he was dating Elaine because he was like the psychologist, and like Elaine tried.
Oh, and Kramer fakes being her boyfriend.
Kramer fakes being his boyfriend, but he talks Kramer into like breaking up with her.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Oh, that was Senator Vreenak?
Yeah, that was.
Yeah, I never connected that, Mark. Thank you.
It's been a long time since I've seen that.
Yeah, so, and cool. So, any final thoughts on the episode before we wrap up?
I mean, I could talk about that episode for 2 hours, but just such a great episode. If you haven't watched it in a while, we did. If you haven't watched it in a while, check it out again, and you'll always see a couple of new things in it.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, before we go, let me name the definitive top 25 Star Trek list. Of course, all three of us will disagree with some of the stuff on here, but we're experts, so this is the definitive list.
Yes, Crazy Joe Davola's therapist, Vincent. Yep.
All right. So, number 25, Q Who. Number 24, Trials and Tribulations. Number 23, Countdown 0 Hour. Number 22, Space Seed. Number 21, Living Witness. Number 20, In a Mirror Darkly. Number 19, Message in a Bottle. Number 18, Twilight. Number 17, Azadi Prime. 16, The Trouble with Tribbles. 15, Call to Arms. 14, The Forge Awakening Kirshar. 13, Best of Both Worlds. 12, Bounds of Terror. 11, Blink of an Eye. 10, Measure of the Man. 9, Duet. 8, Scorpion. 7, Mirror Mirror. 6, The Visitor. 5, The City on the Edge of Forever. 4, Year of Hell. 3, The Inner Light. 2, Yesterday's Enterprise. And number 1 is In the Pale Moonlight.
Interesting. 2 Next Generation episodes in the top 5, and then we got 1 Voyager and 1 TOS, and top being Deep Space Nine. Interesting. I definitely like I definitely like the top half of our list a lot.
Yeah, I do think it works. Cool. All right, well, yeah, we'll just go ahead and wrap up now. Thank you guys so much for joining in the chat, and if you're watching this in the archives, thanks for sticking through all the way to the end, and thank you very much, Akton and Phil, for joining us. So great whenever to have discussions with you guys. So, yeah, just final words to sort of plug your channel.
Okay. Thank you, Mark, for having me, and always good to get together with you and Akton and babble about some stuff. Star Trek is really a lot of fun to talk about. I don't talk about it as much as I would like to, so it's a lot of fun to get to talk to you guys. But if anyone wants to check out more of my stuff, come out, Phil the Issues Guy, search that on YouTube. You'll find all of our stuff. We do episode recaps, a lot of live streams, podcasty type stuff, and some other random things as well. But definitely check it out. And thank you guys so much or thank you, Mark, for having me. And always great talking to you, Akton.
Yeah, this was fun, and thanks for having me as well, Mark. And just to give a little plug to my channel, I do primarily focus on Game of Thrones. You can check out my season 7 predictions, but since this is a Star Trek discussion, let me talk about what I do have for Star Trek, since it gets a lot less views than my Game of Thrones stuff does. So if you like want to hear me rant and ramble on about Star Trek, it is my continuing mission to review every single episode of The Next Generation, one season at a time. And I have gone, there was a large gap between seasons 3 and 4. It took me like a year and a half before I got back to it. And so I just completed season 4. So check it out. It includes a lot of quotes that Mark and I used to, or still say all the time, because we've seen those season 4 episodes so many times that a lot of those things are just ingrained in my head. I'll just, like Tourette syndrome, just start randomly quoting season 4 episodes. And I am actually currently, as I have alluded to earlier, in the midst of recording my season 5 review. But what I do is watch an episode, record a segment, watch an episode. So I'm about halfway through the season 5, but that should be done in the next week or two. So check out my Star Trek stuff, and definitely check out my Game of Thrones stuff. And thanks a lot for having me, Mark.
Cool.
I also wanted to send some love to the episode Brothers that I didn't mention earlier. I saw on my list. That's one of my favorite Brent Spiner episodes in the entire series.
That's a good episode too. Cool. All right, and just a quick plug from me. Next week, I'm doing another Star Trek themed week, and this 5 episode reviews, one from each of the 5 series, on the theme of episodes that I like that everyone else seems to hate. So that should be interesting. You did mention one of the episodes that I own my list, Phil, Frame of Mind, which you also really love. But I'm surprised.
I really like that episode. I think it's one of Briggs' best.
I was not actually aware that people didn't like that episode.
I put that in my top 10 video, and I got a ridiculous amount of comments saying, "Oh, that's in my bottom 10. I hate that episode." That's one of the worst.
That episode's so fucking good. Yeah, are they confusing it? Are they confusing it with the Troy episode that sucks, where she becomes a Romulan? Like, are they confusing it with that episode? Because that episode sucked. I don't know what I just mentioned that episode of the blue. No, I don't like any Troy. I'm biased to anti-Troy and anti. My least favorite episodes are Troy centric, and Jadzia early Deep Space Nine episodes featuring Jadzia are pretty horrible too.
No, I totally agree about Troy. In fact, a spoiler alert, my worst episode of season 4 is The Loss. That episode pisses me off so much. But anyway.
that was in my bottom 5 worst Next Generation episodes too. I hate The Loss. So you come into Troy episodes, that episode. But anyway, yeah. So themed week of episodes that I like that everyone else seems to hate. Now that was one where I just got a bunch of comments of people hating it, but some of the others on my list have been like legitimately are at the bottom of IMDB, and I don't love those episodes like I love Frame of Mind, but I don't think they're that bad. I think people.
You know what? I like All the Way Home. I said it. I like that episode. It's cheesy. It's shitty.
Are you talking about
Move On Home? Yeah, Move On Home. I enjoy that episode.
That is the Deep Space Nine episode I will be reviewing because I don't.
Oh shit! Yeah, go, Mark. As usual, Mark.
As bad as everyone says,
it's not as bad as people think. It's funny. funny as shit. If you look at it like a comedy, I'm sorry, we could go on for a while like this, but yeah, I actually enjoyed that episode. Sorry to spoil your.
Great Avery Brooks performances of him going, "Calvin Rain, come with me." I mean, how can people not like that?
And it's a great Quark episode. I mean, he has that one moment where he kind of overacts a little bit.
Yeah.
No, I don't want to decide. No.
Okay. All right. Well, great talking to you guys. We could go on. I love talking Star Trek, but we have to end now. We've been going over 2 hours. So we're going to sign off now. Thanks, everyone, for joining. Make sure to subscribe to all of our channels, and we will see you next time.